3 minutes after 10. Hurry up and eat any meat that you've got left in your fridge because, oh no, it's okay, relax. It says Rishi Sunak has lifted the imminent ban on meat, or rather the imminent tax on meat. I don't know if you noticed this bit of yesterday's pronouncements. He's come up with what must surely be the absolute genius approach to politics, announcing that you're lifting bans on things that weren't banned. So I'm lifting a tax on meat. There is no tax on meat. Yeah, that's because I lifted it. You see, you can't touch him, can you? Rishi Sunak announced yesterday that there will be no tax on meat thanks to him. And you say, because you are intelligent and informed and moderately educated, you say, well, hang on a minute, there is no tax on meat. There was never going to be a tax on meat. He said, that's because I banned it. You see? I banned it, so you can't. Yes, spin your way out of that, Starmer. He's also banned the 7 bins that you currently have to use to do your recycling. I know what you're thinking. You don't have 7 bins to do your recycling. And even if you did, you'd probably want to know why and what purpose it serves and why. No, doesn't matter. I've banned 7 bins. The 7-bin recycling rule is now over thanks to me, Rishi 7-bin Sunak. But there was no requirement to have. Doesn't matter. I banned it. What else is he going to ban? I've heard, and listen, my sources are not great. This is something that, you should probably turn to a slightly better connected political commentator than me. But I am told that he is about to ban glass hammers, organic elbow grease, and long weights. I don't know if you've ever spent any time at all on a building site, but if you have and you were young, you were probably sent to the hardware store, to the supplier, to pick up some tartan paint and a box of long weights. He's banning all of those. No long weights under Rishi 7-bin Sunak and no more tartan paint. Glass hammers under Rishi 7-bin Sunak will soon be a thing of the past. Do you know what else he's banning? Compulsory car sharing. God, that is a relief. I tell you what, the sooner he bans compulsory car sharing, the better. I had to come in again today with Dirty Gertie from number 30. And honestly, I know she means well, but my goodness me, she could talk the hind legs off a donkey. All I want to do on the way into work is put on the 30th anniversary release of De La Soul's classic album that dropped this morning, sit back and just chill a bit, get ready to decide what we're going to talk about together. But Dirty Gertie from number 30's in the back of the car, giving it this and giving it that. The sooner compulsory car sharing disappears, the better for all of us. What else has he banned? New taxes to discourage flying. Pardon? And also expensive insulation upgrades. Well, insulation is good. It's almost as if he's forgotten the energy crisis, isn't it? One of the reasons why the energy crisis had a scant silver lining, or has a scant silver lining, because it arrived in conjunction with the war in Ukraine. And it reminded us how dependent we are upon natural gas coming out of Russia. So the idea of trying to wean the country off gas was both, tactically and logistically clever, but also, of course, financially, because heat pumps and other more sustainable heat sources will bring down fuel bills by a country mile. So he's gone in the opposite direction on that. Listen, I don't think I'm going to annoy everybody today. I try not to, not everybody. But you might be cross with me for not taking this as seriously as I should. And I get that. It is pretty tragic, isn't it, for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who not only campaigned in 2019 on the pledges that he abandoned yesterday, but also, of course, signed off on them and as Chancellor of the Exchequer, signed off on the finances as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and as recently as July was swearing blind that he wasn't going to flip-flop at all. But it doesn't matter. There's a beautiful morning in many ways. The relationship between the Conservative Party and client media is never clearer than on a morning like this. So what you have is a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, a leader of the Conservative Party, who in July swore blind he wouldn't do what he did yesterday, who as Chancellor signed off on the finances of what he claimed yesterday couldn't be afforded or was too expensive, and who also as Chancellor, I think, also as Chancellor, campaigned in 2019, maybe not as, well, anyway, certainly as a Conservative MP, campaigned in 2019 on a manifesto that pledged to deliver all of the things that he pledged not to deliver yesterday. So by any objective measure, what happened yesterday in terms of politics was despicable, right? Regardless of what you think you know about net zero, if you campaign on a manifesto promising X, if you sign off as Chancellor on the affordability of X, and if you swear blind in July of this year that we would definitely, come hell or high water, be sticking with X, and then you turn around to yesterday and say you're abandoning X because you can't afford it, it's a very bad idea, and you're doing it to look after all the poor people, then in a normal universe, any honest journalist would be queuing up to criticise you, right? Again, I'd say, regardless of what you think about net, or you think you know about net zero, which is probably not as much as, well, we should, is it? Skyhook's also being banned under Rishi Bin Sunak's glorious rule. I'm happy to confirm that. Just a rumour coming in from Hertfordshire. And that's the point, isn't it? That's how broken we are now. Let me show you. I mean, you won't even believe the front page of The Sun, which says, Rishi delays bans on new cars and boilers. So, I mean, here is the thing, right? Nobody was going to have to buy a new car unless they needed to buy a new car. That seems to have been missed. We'll have a look at the politics of it in a minute. And he's also scrapping a meat tax. So the front page of the Sun newspaper, which is not the best selling in the country and is not the force that it was, but it's still, in many ways, the Sun and the Mail and the Telegraph are the pipers to whose tune Rishi Sunak is dancing today. They're actually telling their readers on the front page that he's scrapped a meat tax. He hasn't scrapped a meat tax. That's how pathetic this all is. And then, of course, you look at the bits that everybody is supposed to be celebrating, because as of today, the people that encouraged you to turn Britain into the first country in history to impose economic sanctions on itself, the people who told you that austerity was not only a brilliant idea, but that it was necessitated by the fact that there are too many libraries in Wolverhampton. Thank you, Alexi Sale. The story today that they won't be telling you about involves £15 billion worth of council assets being sold off by 2010. That's libraries, playing fields, community centres, youth clubs, swimming pools, sold off since 2010 when austerity started, because councils need to plug holes in the budgets that have been cut by the government that today is telling you that they are reversing their net zero policies because they're worried about poor people. The absolutely ridiculous Kemi Badenoch touring studios this morning, claiming that Zach Goldsmith, who wins the Stop Clock is Right Twice a Day award for 2023, Zach Goldsmith doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to net zero because he's so rich. But Rishi Sunak, who is richer, he definitely does. So you can't bring the personal wealth of a politician into a critique of their net zero attitude unless it's relevant to all politicians. So Zach Goldsmith, who I think is an absolute flump for the record and quite spectacularly rewarded for failure by Boris Johnson, is right about this. But he's not, because he's so rich. Rishi Sunak, who agreed with Zach Goldsmith last week, and last month and last year, and when they campaigned together in 2019 as senior Tories, he's wrong about this until he changes his mind, at which point he's right, and the fact that he's very rich doesn't matter at all. There's like a conveyor belt somewhere, isn't there? Because you sort of, Priti Patel drops off the edge of it. Do you remember in the Generation Game? You'd sit there, you'd watch the thing. So you'd think Priti Patel's a tease maid. She's just gone past. Here comes the cuddly toy. There's another one. Who's Kemi? Where did she come from? Oliver Dowden? What's it? It's like a conveyor belt of spectacularly incompetent people who continue to be rewarded because they continue to peddle the nonsenses upon which the last... Bear with me. The last 4 Conservative governments have been built on absolute nonsense. And because it's 12 minutes after 10 and I haven't really brought Brexit into things yet, the reason why they continue to do this is what was on display yesterday. It doesn't matter what's true anymore. It doesn't matter what's real. It doesn't matter what is, what's the word that I'm looking for? It doesn't matter what is evidence-based. They have persuaded themselves, quite rightly, that people will believe anything in a country where the nonsense is being punted by politicians who enjoy the sycophantic support of most of the media. And of course, the media that doesn't support them still invites the vampires and shills from the fossil fuel funded so-called think tanks onto their programmes as valid contributors to the debate. So the pool of conversation has been so completely corrupted that they think they can persuade, they think there are votes in this because they think they can persuade you view that Labour is going to force you to sell your old car and buy a new one, or force you to scrap your perfectly functional boiler and install a new one. And of course they're not. That's the most interesting thing about what the weird political moment in which we find ourselves. I don't think this is going to move the polls at all, by the way, and nor do the polls, actually. The new net zero plan is unlikely to win back many wavering Conservative voters, according to polling and focus group that Downing Street has already seen. It's more than 4,000 people interview with voters looking at wavering Tory voters. And you know, it might sway one, but there's more over there who won't be swayed at all. Snap polling carried out by YouGov suggests it's going to be popular with current supporters of the party, and of course it will be popular with wealth. But why has he done it? 40 minutes after 10. I'll tell you why he's done it. And why has he done it at such short notice? And why has he done it days after pledging that he wouldn't do it? And why has he done it in direct contradiction of the manifesto on which he campaigned in 2019, or the financial forecast that he signed off as Chancellor even more recently? He's done it partly because none of that matters in a corrupted country with a corrupt media. If the truth is not being properly reported, here's a very rich Tory to tell me why he loves this idea because he thinks it's going to be good for poor people. How do you feel about taxes going up to help poor people? No, absolutely not. No, not at all. No, deeply opposed to that. How do you feel about austerity, screwing poor people left, right and centre for the last 13 years? Yeah, necessary evil, John. So, I mean, tough business. Too many libraries in Wolverhampton. It's very, very, very bad. How do you feel about the cost of living crisis? Well, I don't really have a view on that. I'm very, very rich. Thank you for inviting me onto your show, by the way. I used to be treasurer of the Tory party, And how do you feel about these new net zero policies? They're absolutely brilliant. What you've got to remember is they're really going to help poor people, and we really care. We really care about poor people on my side of politics, except when it comes to austerity, Brexit, taxes, pay, wages, cost of living, income, and actual assets and amenities that ordinary people can use because they are provided by the councils that we have come close to bankrupting over the course of the last 13 years. But up with net zero. Great for poor people. How did you vote on Brexit? Brexit all the way. Yeah, John. Yeah, I love Brexit. It's great. Any benefits? Anyway, time for the travel. It's 16 minutes after 10, and what I want you to tell me, seriously, is from the point of view of people in the actual business, right? So it's a 5-year delay. What difference is it going to make? But the point that people don't really understand is that nobody was going to have to buy a new car unless they needed a new car, right? Nobody was going to have to buy a new boiler unless they needed a new boiler. And the people who were going to be compelled to replace their old knackered boiler with a heat pump were going to get £5,000 help already. The costs of that kind of technology are going to come plummeting down as it becomes more popular. But of course, even though it may be a little bit more expensive than a gas or an oil-based boiler, the fuel bills will come down commensurately as well. The one good thing in yesterday's announcement was an actual 50% increase in the size of the subsidy that you'll get if you need to replace your gas boiler with a heat pump, which I think has gone up from a maximum of £5,000 to £7,500. So in the detail, even they recognise the necessity of doing this. They've just announced a delay, which I am going to cautiously suggest, 10:17 is the time, doesn't really touch the sides of anybody's lived experience. 0345 6060 973. You can talk about the politics of it, but unless you're a landlord who really didn't want to help their tenants bring their fuel bills down by improving the insulation in the property, I can't see who really should be popping the corks today. Unless you're a landlord or a fossil fuel investor, unless you're making a lot of money out of fossil fuel shares, or you have got a bunch of properties or a couple of properties that are quite run down and you didn't want to be compelled to insulate them because that's not going to help you at all. All it's going to do is bring down the fuel bills for your tenants. What who is supposed to be celebrating today? 0345 6060 973 is question number one. Who is supposed to be celebrating today? It's a genuine question, because my feeling is that they think this is going to be like ULEZ. And I don't think it is like ULEZ, because although there was loads and loads and loads of misinformation surrounding ULEZ, and lots of people in Uxbridge believed that they were going to have to get rid of their cars when they weren't. People weren't checking whether they were compliant or not. All sorts of miscomprehensions out there. The political power of saying to someone, you are this party, even though the Labour Party nationally had sort of managed to detach itself, and certainly has since, from Sadiq Khan's policy, saying to someone, this lot are going to make you sell your car, right? That is powerfully political. It is politically powerful. It's Horlicks. It's not true. And even if it were true, the amount of help you're going to get to replace your car is considerable. It doesn't matter. There's something, we talked about this yesterday, the psychology of saying to somebody, they are coming for your car, right? They are coming for your car. That really worked, and that just saved the Tories' bacon in Uxbridge and Isleworth. And that is the only good news the Tories have had since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. Don't forget that. It's really important. The single tiny nugget of good news that the Conservative Party has had electorally since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister was a catastrophic loss of support in Uxbridge and Isleworth that wasn't quite catastrophic enough to see them lose the seat. They would have lost it if everyone who voted Green had voted Labour. But it was the best result that Rishi Sunak has delivered to his party since he became Prime Minister. And it was, by most objective measures, still a catastrophic result, but not quite catastrophic enough to lose the seat. And everybody agrees, from all parties and all political persuasions, that the reason they got away with it was because the ULEZ rhetoric was so effective. Telling people that Labour were going to take their cars away worked. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. This is Brexit Britain. The days of policies or promises or pledges or claims having to be true, they're still a long way over the horizon. So telling them that we're going to take your car away, and they're trying to turn the micro into the macro. They're trying to increase the fear of them coming along and taking something away. The truth of the policy, both before and after the delay, is that nobody needs to buy a new car unless they need to buy a new car, and nobody needs to install a new boiler unless they need to install a new boiler. But they think there's politics and political gain in telling you that, well, you're going to have to buy one and we've delayed it now, and the other lot probably won't. What did I say? Did I not say Ruislip? Uxbridge and Ruislip? What did I say? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I meant Ruislip. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. 0345 6060 973. So who is supposed to be celebrating this flip-flop? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Because the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, as I didn't know at the opening of yesterday's show and should have done, forecast costs of bringing in net zero being roughly being roughly double of what it would cost not to do it, if you see what I mean. So the economics of it makes very, very little sense, unless, of course, you are heavily invested in fossil fuels or desperate for a Tory victory, or a landlord who doesn't want to pay for insulation in his property so that the cost of the tenants' fuel bills come down. I can't see who else is supposed to be celebrating today. 0345 6060 973. Tell me who you think is supposed to be celebrating, or tell me why you are, okay? South Ruislip, not Isleworth, sorry. 22 minutes after 10 is the time. Hey, at least I got the day right. It's not. I mean, it's a bit of a Rishi Sunak-style defence, isn't it? I just misnomered Uxbridge and South Ruislip as Uxbridge and Isleworth for some reason, caused enormous upset in the borough of Uxbridge and Isleworth. And my defence is, well, yesterday I got the day wrong. That's a very Tory defence, isn't it? I love that. James, you just completely got the name of a constituency wrong. You're supposed to be a sort of commentator on matters political, and it was one of the most significant by-elections of the last 5 years. So, yeah, but yesterday I got the day wrong. Yesterday I said it was Tuesday when it was Wednesday. So I take that as a win, just misnaming little constituency like that. Net Zero, who is supposed to be celebrating and who is? And why? And what? And even wherefore? Go on. Sarah's in Liverpool. Sarah, what do you reckon?
Morning, James.
Hello, Sarah.
The only ones who'll be celebrating today, apart from big oil and gas,
yes,
will be those members of the Conservative Party who have got shares in oil and gas.
Or donations. You don't necessarily just have to have shares. You could just be, trousering a nice little donation to your campaign fund or your office expenses, or some tickets to the Derby or something, or you're in the Grand National up your way.
Yeah. The thing is, in their short-sightedness, in thinking of their friends, the one thing they have forgotten in all of this are the people, and most important, the ones who are going to bear the brunt of the mess of climate change, the poor and the most vulnerable in society.
And future generations. But I heard a former treasurer of the Tory party earlier today insisting that this is all, as with everything they've ever done, motivated by concern about the least well-off.
Is that a joke?
Yes.
I did hear it. I got news for you for a minute.
I did hear it, but me suggesting to you that it's worth taking something like that seriously is a joke, obviously.
It is a joke.
I know.
From what I've seen for the last 13 years, all they've done is hammer and destroy and go out of their way to actively destroy the most vulnerable in society through every means possible.
And of course that creeps up. That creeps up. I'm going to say something which I didn't say in the introduction, which is remarkable, really, given that it was about 22,000 minutes long. I'm not sure, oddly, that what he's done is actually that big a deal.
Well, you might think so, James, but believe you and me, I see the effects of climate change. And
yes, I know, but by 2030...
Each and every day,
sure.
I see the effects.
I know, but in terms of pushing it back to 2035 and saying at the same time that the massive majority of cars sold then will have an electric component to them anyway because they're getting cheaper all the time and people are buying more. It's psychological politicking this rather than political politicking. He's just sort of, it's a bit like saying to someone, they're trying to ban your salad cream, right? And they're not really trying to ban your salad cream, but you've announced that they're not allowed to ban your salad cream. But by 2030, there's not going to be any salad cream for sale anyway, because everyone will be eating mayonnaise. But somehow by telling people that they're not banning your salad cream today, you win some sort of short-term political benefit. I need to explore this a little further, and I need to squeeze in one more call before the news, Sarah, only because my introduction was so interminably long. David is in Chorley. David, what's going on?
James, I'd just like to thank Russ Sunak for what he did yesterday.
Okay, hey, mate, come on. Call him by his proper name. 7 bins.
Okay. Fair enough. He, in 50 minutes, has helped me to decide who I'm not going to vote for, because in 50 minutes, he's allowed me to see that if it suits his political positioning, he will change his mind in a heartbeat. He will deliver anything that will help them to stay in power, because he knows that then he can always find a reason in the near future to change his mind again and to, quote, scrap it. He's become Scrappy-Doo. That's what he is. Out of Scooby-Doo, he's Scrappy-Doo.
I like that, actually. Scrappy-Doo. Yeah, Action Man, Scrappy-Doo, call him whatever you want. I mean, I don't think he's going to wobble back again on this one, is he?
No, he's not. But what, if I can, James, it'll take 30 seconds. I call him a fence post turtle. Have you ever heard of a fence post turtle?
Well, I have now.
Let me tell you what it is. You're taking your dog for a walk and you walk in a field and there's a fence and there's a fence post.
Yeah.
And on the top of that fence post is sat a turtle.
Oh, yeah.
Two things you know. One, it didn't get there on its own. And two, now it's there, it hasn't got a Scooby-Doo what to do.
That's actually brilliant. Is that your own, or is that
It's my own. It's my own, and I've been trying to get it on for a year, and I keep getting pushed back by your researchers and producers.
Right, they're fired. I'm firing all of them. That's absolutely brilliant. It didn't
Put it in your book.
It's too late for the book. Don't rub it in. Every day there's more stuff that could have been in the book, and I'm not ready to sign up for a new one yet. David, thank you. 10:30 is the time. Who's celebrating and why? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 33 minutes after 10 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, some people can have the same brilliant idea at the same time, but I don't bombard me with evidence that fence post turtle may not have been our last caller's sole and immediate personal invention. It's still brilliant. You know it didn't get there by itself, and it's got absolutely no idea what to do next. Rishi Sunak, the fence post turtle of politicians. I know it's very serious, the net zero stuff, but you can't get angry every day. You can't do the serious stuff. We are discussing it seriously, while also reflecting on how hilarious it is that Kemi Badenoch is reduced to claiming that you can't trust Zach Goldsmith on this because he's rich, but you can trust Rishi Sunak, who is richer. I don't know that she does get the Dorries stamp, does she? She's not too stupid to realise how stupid she is, like Nadine Dorries is, or Mark Francois, or someone like that. I don't think so, but you get possibly too far down the rabbit hole to realise how ridiculous she sounds. And then, of course, the other element of the hilarity to be derived from the net zero brouhaha today is, well, there's two elements of it. Rishi Sunak getting a round of applause for banning things that didn't exist, like a tax on meat and compulsory car sharing, and also all of his cheerleaders, both client journalists and Tory politicians alike, queuing up to say I really like this, really great, because it's good for the poor. I mean, how boiled would your brain have to be if you'd paid even the scantest attention to British politics of the last, 500 years, for a right-wing politician to come out and say that the reason why they're in support of something is because it helps the poor? Seriously, if you buy that, there's a bridge I've got this amazing bridge to sell you. It's just gorgeous. And I just for one day only, seriously. But then again, I suppose people still pull over in vans, don't they, right across the country, claiming they've just finished installing some hi-fi equipment around the corner and they've got some amazing state-of-the-art speakers in the back that you can have for 20 quid. So you hand over your 20 quid and you get them home and there's a couple of bricks in a cardboard box. 25 minutes to 11. I just described Brexit, didn't I, by accident? Alex is in Newcastle. Alex, who's celebrating?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
The think tanks are the people celebrating, the ones that are pushing climate denial in order to help their fossil fuel sponsors. Is the simple answer.
Oh, how dare you. You are not
the answer you wanted to hear.
You are not suggesting, I hope, for a moment that Net Zero Watch is the policy wing of the Global Warming Policy Foundation that has its headquarters at 55 Tufton Street and has received funding from US groups linked to the oil and gas sector, despite claiming that it is independent of the fossil fuel industry, while in Britain refusing to disclose any of its domestic funding.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Oh, that's absolutely outrageous. You'll be telling me next that the Net Zero Scrutiny Group in Parliament, which is allied with and affiliated to the global warming policy, has been pushing for this sort of nonsense for years.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say next.
Oh, my days. And I mean, you're not suggesting, I hope, for a minute that their mates in that curious corner of London, the Institute of Economic Affairs, are already celebrating Rishi Sunak's net zero rebalance without revealing who funds them. But we do know, those of us who've been paying attention, that they've received money from BP and US climate denialist funders in the past, Alex.
Yes, that's exactly what was on my mind, and I'm very glad you brought it up.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, at least you're not suggesting that the Taxpayers Alliance, also headquartered at 55 Tufton Street and headed by, or founded rather, by a man that Liz Truss wants to put into the House of Lords, is also celebrating today and claiming that it's going to be of benefit to poorer households without revealing the plutocrats and vested interests that bankroll their entire operation.
You've read my mind, James.
Well, you're a cynical old soul with very little evidence to back up your prejudices, aren't you, Alex?
I am indeed, apparently, yeah.
It's crazy, right?
It is absolutely crazy. And it's like, as you say, you can find so much evidence of this from so many other think tanks that are all working together.
There's even a book coming out soon which knits it all together like a Christmas scarf.
I wonder what it's called.
I'll come up with a title shortly. You're quite clued up on this, I think, aren't you? I'm
reasonly clued up.
On the broader, the sort of science of it, rather than just the dark funding of it. Mm-hmm. Apart from businesses pointing out that the absence of consistency is unhelpful, and of course, and this won't hurt him because none of the people that like him care, and none of the people whose job it is to point out why they should care will do so. Highlighting how utterly without backbone or principle Rishi Sunak is. how big a deal is it? I mean, a 5-year delay on the point at which people who need a new car will have to buy a new car of a certain type rather than being still free to buy one of a different type. How in the great scheme of things, and with the business objections aside, how big a deal actually is it, do you think, in the context of climate change?
It sends a message, James. That's the main thing about it, right? It sends a message to everybody saying that we have picked what side of this debate we want to be on, and we're going to be firmly sticking to this side, despite the summer that we've already had and the evidence for the economy that this is not going to help. We think that this is what we should be doing to get votes, which I don't understand personally.
That's
I think this is what we should be doing in order to help our fossil fuel friends.
Yeah.
So we're planting our feet here, and then who knows what he's going to say next.
So it's all gone a bit Brexit. I don't care about the science. I don't care about the evidence. I believe that I can win votes by convincing people that we will protect them from a threat that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
While it completely ignoring a threat that does exist, actually, which is the kind of Project Fear equivalent of this analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then anybody who tries to bring up about the climate crisis or anything, they all get shot down as, you're all doom and gloom and you're idealistic.
Eco-zealot is the word they like to use. Which is
or even eco-terrorist.
Eco-terrorist and eco-zealots, or as we call them in our house, scientists.
Exactly.
Or experts, but no, not in the Tory high, not on Tufton Street there. Eco-zealot. So science. Hello, I've got a PhD in climate science. Oh, you're an eco-zealot, are you? I've got no qualifications whatsoever, but I know what you're talking about. 10:40 is the time. Thank you, Alex. Ed's in Brighton. Ed, what would you like to say?
Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't think that Rishi's messaging is necessarily making the climate skeptics celebrate. When I say that,
they are celebrating.
Yeah, I agree partially with you. I do think the think tanks, like the previous caller were mentioning, I think they would be celebrating. But the everyday guy on the street who doesn't believe in climate change, let's say,
yes,
he specifically called them out and called them extremists. I think that was the wording used. So I think he's trying to separate the Tory base from that, but the actual policies he's proposing do actually help the climate deniers at the end of the day.
Well, how much do they help the climate? I mean, I think that Alex has given me pause, actually. He's given me chills, and they're multiplying, because the suggestion that this is the beginning of a process rather than the end of it is quite worrying. So you're right in terms of what happened yesterday. It's delay while still recognising reality. People like the think tanks, they want to deny the reality, just as they did with Brexit. And this is a step in their direction, potentially.
Sure, yeah. I don't think the think tanks genuinely believe that climate change is not a real thing. The science is not a difficult concept to understand. It's been known for like 100 years even. Yes. But,
no, some of them do. I mean, some of the people on Uncle Stuart's Facebook page genuinely think that the science is invented and that it's all
those aren't the people in the think tanks, are they?
I don't know. Nigel Lawson, I don't know if you ever encountered him talking about this stuff, but he certainly seemed to believe it. And he's sort of their patron saint.
Maybe. But obviously there are huge short-term incentives for them to do that. Anyway, the thing I wanted to talk about actually was what he was mentioning about meat and plane taxes.
Yes.
And he's, those aren't things that exist, as we've mentioned.
Ironically, that doesn't mean you can't ban. That doesn't mean you can't ban them, though.
Well, I don't agree with a ban. But
philosophically, does something have to exist in order for you to ban it?
Yes, I'm not denying that. All I'm saying is, I think those would be good steps to take, taxes on meat and planes.
Yes, that's quite a good point.
The only wide-scale, I think, way we can address, the amount of carbon we put into the atmosphere is address it, within the framework of capitalism we work in, and that is, taxing the amount of carbon we use. It's the only way to easily integrate a punishment on the amount of carbon we have in our total economy.
And yes, reducing the amount of carbon in the total economy should be the top priority. And as time passes, I suppose more novel and original measures will be adopted to do it. And another sort of, to combine your call with Alex, who was on before you, the idea that this might just be a new indication of the direction of travel would be a lot more worrying than anything that was actually stated yesterday that the meat tax stuff, I mean, they don't even pretend anymore because Mikey Smith over at the Mirror has dug out where this absolute nonsense has probably come from. In October 2021, I think it was floated somewhere that there might be a tax on meat. And the government responded, I'll say that again, in October 2021, the government responded by saying this was an academic research paper, not a government policy. So he was even lying when he called it a proposal, never mind a tax. And the government added in October 2021 that we have no plans whatsoever to dictate consumer behaviour in this way. For that reason, our net zero strategy published yesterday contained no such plans. So he's reversed a policy that was already facing in the way it was facing before he reversed it. I mean, this is both semantically and philosophically fascinating. Can you ban something that doesn't exist? Because I think you can, technically. I could I'm banning unicorns from this studio, right? And when the election comes around next year, I'm going to ask you how many unicorns have got into this studio. And you're going to say none, James. Or at least not while you're on air. And then I'm going to say, well, that proves how effective my ban was and what an effective leader I am. So as of now, unicorns are banned from this studio. And so are bins. No, any more than 6. You can't have more than 6 bins in this studio at any one time. I'm banning the 7th bin from this studio. Have we ever had... Is there even one bin in this studio? There must be. But I'm definitely banning unicorns. Vote 7 bins. It is 10:48 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we're just mapping who might be celebrating the announcements by Rishi Sunak yesterday, which are very both Brexity and ULEZ-y. So the plan is to persuade people that he's protecting them from a sort of attack upon their boilers or their cars, which isn't really backed up by the facts, because literally nobody under the new proposals or the old proposals would have had to buy a new car or a new boiler unless they needed to buy a new car or a new boiler. And the Brexity bit of it is sort of claiming that it's going to be good for people or that we should pay less attention to the science and the experts. But there will be other areas, landlords, for example, who don't want to pay to insulate their properties and bring down the fuel bills of their tenants. They will be celebrating. And so will the fossil fuel companies and their shills in so-called think tanks, which are, of course, really just dark money-funded lobby groups, coming soon to a television and radio studio near you. 10:49 is the time. I love this quote from Tolstoy that John has reminded us of. He says, I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, and yet assure myself and others that I am very sorry for him and wish to ease his lot by all possible means, except by getting off his back. And that is the Tory approach to these policies today, claiming that they are designed entirely to benefit poor people, which, you know, I guess if you woke up literally 30 seconds ago and could remember nothing about what had ever happened in history before, you might believe that a Tory policy was motivated by a desire to make life better for the less well-off. 10:50 is the time. Tim's in Southend. Tim, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very, very welcome.
Yeah, it benefits me, unfortunately, and it pains me to say that because I was about to vote Labour, and I really think Labour have missed the boat on this one. I really think Labour should... These should be Labour policies, and I know you've got a lot of people ringing up, and they're all banging the same drum. But I'm really lost now because the policies that were announced yesterday are what I think Starmer and the rest of Labour should have done six months, a year ago.
Oh, fair enough. Now, what is the personal impact that you're talking about when you say it helps?
The personal impact for me is I'm not well off. I'm not what I would call middle class, and I'm not poor. I'm in between. Yeah. So I work a lot. I've got a mortgage, and my boiler does need to be changed within the next 5 to 6 years. Yeah. I've looked into heat pumps, and I've looked into the whole spectrum of the environment. I do believe in net zero, absolutely. The problem I've got is that now this makes my life a little bit more relaxed and a little bit easier, James. And I'm being absolutely honest with you. That's fine.
No, listen, if you're voting from a position of measurable financial advantage, then, I mean, no one's going to argue with you. So can you talk us through the numbers a bit? I'm not expecting Bamba Gascoigne.
Not really. I mean, basically, when I've looked into the boiler, the to go from a boiler to a heat pump is hugely expensive.
But you know how much the subsidy is?
Well, the subsidy I thought was about 5,000.
And that's just gone up. That went up to 7.5 yesterday.
Yeah, it's gone up to 7.5 yesterday, which again, for a lot of people, they might be sneering at that. That is a big bonus.
Who's sneering at that?
Well, yeah, but people are saying that all the policies...
No, but it's only... No, Tim, mate, it's only a bonus for you if you replace your gas boiler with a heat pump, which you've decided you're not going to do.
Absolutely true.
So it's not a bonus for you at all.
No,
so people might sneer at that.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that if, this isn't going to help the poor, right? I get that, okay? And this isn't going to help the middle class to well-off people. But the people in between, the people that start... Say, for instance, I have to keep a petrol car going for at least another 10, 15 years. Now, second-hand petrol cars now, the price of them has gone through absolutely gone through the roof.
Do you think it's going to come down now as a consequence?
I think what I think will happen, I think it will spread out slightly longer. I know 5 years isn't a long time. I'm not by any means saying that it is. It's going to make a massive impact.
But you are saying it's going to make a massive impact, massive enough to change your voting, massive enough to change your voting intention.
The point I'm trying to make is that these should have been Labour policies.
No, I know, I understand that point, and I disagree with you,
right.
not massively strongly, but that's why I'm really interested in the calculations that you've made, or the kind of detail that you've explored, because your fuel bills would come down, wouldn't they, if you had a heat pump, and $7.5 grand's worth of help putting it in.
Yeah, but James, if you look into heat pumps seriously, go on.
I have looked into them. And the first advice we received,
people, they're a disaster.
No, I know they are. That was the advice we received, was that just wait a bit, wait and see, not make your decision now, which you've done.
Well, no, but the thing is, I haven't made my decision now. I've got a decision.
So you should make it in 5 or 6 years' time.
Yeah, if my boiler lasts that long. But the point is now, I'm not going to be legislated against in a few years' time that I have to change to a heat pump.
Well, you wouldn't be, because it was 2030 anyway, and 5 or 6 years' time is 2028 or 2029. Yeah,
but I'm hoping my boiler is going to last longer. The point I'm trying to make is...
Well, your whole calculation was based on telling me that it was going to conk out within the next 5 or 6 years, and possibly sooner.
Okay, so look, the longevity of my boiler is about 5 to 6 more years, which takes me to 2028, right?
Yeah.
So let's say it lasts another 2 years, and I get to 2030 by a month, and then I've now got to spend a heat pump, and there's no way I can get a heat pump.
No, fair enough. No, I get that.
Now that's changed for me.
We're narrowing the constituency down to people whose boilers are going to conk out within a 6-month window, so we can add them to the list of people who are celebrating.
Not really, James. Look. I mean, I know you can sort of make fun of it a little bit.
I'm not making fun. Come on, man. I'm not making fun of it at all. You said everyone else was banging on.
I'm narrowing it down to 6 months, but I'm not. Listen, if your boiler, say you just replaced your boiler, and your boiler is going to last 11 years, yeah. So let's say you get to 30, 32, and you can't afford a £15,000 heat pump and all the other stuff that goes with it.
With a $7.5 grand subsidy.
With a $7.5 grand subsidy at the moment, we don't know what the future's going to hold. What I'm saying is this has spread it out, so it's taken a little bit of pressure off.
And I respect that. I didn't mean to make you feel like you were being teased. But we can't finish the conversation without bringing the environment into it, can we?
I get that. Now listen, as far as the environment goes, there are a couple of factors that I think the average person on the street really gets.
Go on.
Okay, the first one is, and I know it's been said a lot, and people sneer at it. We are 1% of the world's polluters. Okay.
Yeah.
We are 50% ahead now of all the other countries in Europe, like France.
So we should slow down.
No, what I'm saying is that we are getting there well ahead of everybody else. Now, just slowing down slightly is not going to affect the environment at all.
Could you think of? I mean, I hear you, but the idea that because we're doing well, we should do less well is probably not something you'd apply in many other areas of life or politics.
I know, but I think because we're doing well, we don't have to punish people in the bracket that I'm in.
And that's what I respect. But what if 2 years from now the numbers have changed? What if 5 years from now the numbers have changed?
Well, then you have to respect... See, something else people have constantly said today. Now, I've always said I would like politicians to say, look, I got this wrong, I got that right, I've always said that. And one of my big bugbears with Johnson and all that is they never admitted anything wrong. Now Sunak has come out with this yesterday, which was a complete shock to me. And when he came out with it, the first thing everybody said was about what they've done previously, I'm going by today, what's happening today. And I think you're going to find a lot of people will. I'm just so upset that Starmer and Labour, you talk to them, they haven't even got a policy on this.
Well, they have,
All they
mate.
say is,
They've got really
well, they haven't.
strong
They just say, we're
policies
waiting for
on
the
this.
figures.
Ed
We've got
Miliband's
this,
been
we've got that.
working on it for 7 or 8 years.
And they've already come out and said they're going to stick with the original policies that before Sunak's come out of this thing already.
And yeah, of course they have.
Do you think that's going to play well for them, really?
Well, it is for the motor industry.
Yeah, but the motor industry isn't the average Joe on the street.
No,
You don't even drive a
but
car
they make the
yourself,
cars
James, do you?
you're going to buy.
But you don't even drive a car, right?
I do drive a car.
Oh, okay. I was listening to you the other day, and you were telling me that you don't drive.
No, I do, just not very often, and I don't have a weird emotional
okay.
relationship with my car.
Oh, that's right. That's what I was listening to at the time. Yeah, all I'm saying is.
But I mean, you don't
should
need to
be
drive
more
a car. You don't need to
left-wing
drive a car to know that Ford are quite an important voice in the car world.
No, but you need to drive a car to appreciate what you pay all the time. You know, it's a lot of money going out.
And the cost of running a car with an electric option is lower than the cost of running a car without one, isn't it?
Not at the moment, no.
Well, it is, mate.
It isn't. The hybrids, we should have gone hybrid, we didn't. Hybrid is definitely
who's
the way
we?
forward. The country. The country should have gone for hybrid stuff, yeah. But hybrid, if... I'm not going to go into all the details about cars and stuff. I do like cars and things, but the hybrid...
I will chalk you up alongside the think tanks and the fossil fuel lobby and the Tory politicians as someone who welcomes this policy.
I just welcome it because of the pay bracket. I mean, I think if you're not in my pay bracket, you're not struggling like I am every day, then it's very easy to
Which
say,
is why I really
we've got
wanted
to do
you
this,
to
we've
talk
got
me
to
through
do
the
that.
numbers, but we can't because we don't know what they'll be when your boiler conks out.
Well, do you know what they'll be when my boiler conks out?
No. But I know you get $7,500 towards a heat pump.
At the moment. That was from yesterday. But
Yeah, I
what's
know.
it going to be in
So
5 years' time?
that's
10
gone
years'
up.
time? But what's it going to be in 10 years' time, then, James? What's the figures for me? If you could tell me, that'd be great.
Well, and when I can, you can tell me whether it's a good policy or not.
Exactly. There you go.
But you've already told me that you think it's a good policy.
I think it's a good policy for me at the moment, yeah. It's going to make a big difference. It's eased it off. It's given me another 5 years, but I haven't even got to worry about it now for another 5 years. My whole life would be changed.
But it wasn't coming in until 2030, which is seven years away.
It's 7 years' time, but there's another 5 years on top of that now, James. This is the point.
We're going round in circles. I'm seriously, I'm chalking you up.
James,
I think what you should have come on, if you'd come on and said my boiler is going to conk out in 10 years, this would have gone a lot better for you.
I think it's gone well for me.
I'm sorry, that sounds wrong. But if you'd have made more sense if you'd said my boiler's going to conk out in 10 years.
The main
because as it stands, your boiler is conking out before the new deadline and before the old deadline.
So you concentrate on my boiler. The point I'm trying to make
What do you mean concentrate on your boiler? It's the only thing you've spoken about.
It's not. I spoke about cars. I spoke about...
And then you said you didn't want to.
For instance, one of my children... Here's something you said about landlords, right?
Yeah.
Which you were quite sneering about as well.
No, I wasn't.
You did. You said landlords won't have to insulate so that poor people get cold.
That's not sneering.
True.
That's just true.
But that's a generalisation, which is bad. There's a lot of good landlords out there. Now, I've got one of my children...
And the good ones will not have a problem with insulating their properties.
Oh, you say that? So all good landlords are rich, are they?
No, all good landlords will be insulating their properties.
Good landlords don't.
In order to bring down the
rents.
cost of the fuel bills for their tenants.
Now, one of my children rents, okay, and they're with the good landlords, yeah, and they pay a very fair rent, and they negotiate with the landlord on improvements and stuff like that. That guy now has got more time, yeah? A lot of landlords are actually kicking people out and selling the houses.
Right.
Because of the new things, and that's true.
So we're down with the landlords, and we're down with the... Well, what are we down with? The people selling second-hand petrol cars, and we're down with the theoretical boiler replacements between 8 and 12 years hence.
And all you're talking about, James, is what they've done in the past. I'm saying these should be Labour policies, and they're not.
Yep, you began by saying
I'm very
that.
disappointed.
But of course, if they change their mind this often, how do you know they're not going to change it again?
When's the last time they changed them? I'm glad they've changed their mind.
Yesterday, Tim.
Politicians should change their mind.
Yesterday. So in July, he swore blind he was not moving on this one, and in September, he's moved.
It doesn't alter the fact that a lot of people it's going to benefit, James.
I know, and we've just listed them. We've just listed them.
You're going to get all the fanboys ringing you up, all the eco people ringing you up.
I've given you longer than anybody else because I really wanted to explore your arguments, and I think we can both agree that it was a helpful and informative experience for everybody involved. 11:01 is the time. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. I thought King Charles might deliver that speech in French. I wonder, I don't know. I mean, it would have been pretty classy, wouldn't it? He must do some of the speaking in French. Change of pace now. The favourite subject, perhaps, of mine over the years, the question of class and the class divide. Some fascinating research into the difference that it makes to your life, looking at how background, the role that background plays in social mobility. If I said to you that background is now a bigger barrier to social mobility than it has been at any point since the 1980s, what would you say? You'd say, yeah, of course it is, or I disagree. And then we'd be left with the problem, of course, of separating the anecdotal from the data-driven. And that's where you come in, because the Deputy Chief Executive at the National Centre for Social Research tells us today that their latest survey reflects the profound change of the British population since 1983. More people now go to university, more people are employed in so-called white-collar jobs, more women, including those with younger children, go out to work, and a growing population of older people means there are more men and women who are no longer working at all. We're more ethnically diverse. Decline in marriage rates has been accompanied by more diverse types of family formation. So loads and loads of change. Whether you consider it to be good or bad is, I suppose, up to you. But perhaps unexpectedly, given where we sit on international league tables of wealth and what have you, social mobility is down. Your background is now a bigger bar to social mobility than it has been since the 1980s. And I really want to ask why. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Do you want to know a secret? I don't know whether you can tell sometimes that when I'm describing a story to you, I don't sound quite as fluent and as fluid as I might do. And the reason is I've cut this story out of the newspaper and I've somehow managed to miss the first paragraph of the story. So I read it earlier and understood it, and am keen to discuss it, but I've cut the wrong bit of the bloody paper, and it either that. So it was on the bottom bit of a paper. So the first paragraph was on the left-hand facing page, and the other 4 columns were on a right-hand facing page. And I cut both bits out of the newspaper, but the one column that was on the left-hand facing page has disappeared, which means it's probably fluttered out of my grasp as I walk downstairs from the office to the studio. I have to make the same walk every day. I give a little wave to Alexander Armstrong, who is strutting his stuff on Classic FM, and a little wave to Capital Gold and Smooth. And sometimes someone behind me will go, "Excuse me, I think you've dropped something," and I'll turn around and a little bit of paper has fluttered to the floor. And that means I don't come on air at 10 o'clock without having my details and my information in front of me. And what I've managed to do with this one is come on air without the opening paragraph of the story. But let's crack on anyway. The headline's fairly straightforward. Return of the class divide. And it talks about the very simple fact that since the 1980s, your social background, the last caller, Tim in Southend, talked a lot about class and his perception of himself as being neither working class nor middle class. And it is something that this country has a curious obsession with, despite the fact that, for me at least, it's increasingly I don't want to say meaningless. It's increasingly hard to know exactly what it means, largely because of the massive uptick in the things that I've just listed for you. But if I wanted you to explain to someone who hasn't been paying attention why your background is now a bigger barrier to social mobility than at any point, frankly, in living memory, I just want you to tell me why. 8 minutes after 11. What has changed? What are the things that have changed since 1983? We'll use that as a starting point. What has changed since 1983 that means if you want to move up the ladder of life, and I do often think that Britain and British politics in particular doesn't properly recognise people who don't, people who are happy with their lot. Labour Party's problem is that it tends to cast everybody as needing help, and the Tory Party's problem is it tends to cast nobody as needing help or nobody as deserving help. That's quite good, actually. I might jot that down. So the Labour Party's problem is that it casts everybody as needing help, and the Tory Party's problem is it casts nobody as deserving help. And there you have the fundamental sort of conundrum at the heart of two-party politics in the United Kingdom for the last 200 years. And of course, some people are happy. Some people are content with their lot. Cost of living crises and energy costs notwithstanding, some people, and I always feel a little bit self-conscious putting myself in this category because of privilege and luck and what have you, but some people would be quite content just to be left tootling along roughly where they are now. Who appeals to them politically? I often wonder. What is the party of the content? I don't know. But I do know this. If you want to rise up the ladder, if you want to improve your social standing, if you want to be better off than your parents were, then it is less likely to happen in 2023 than it was in 1983. And I honestly don't know why. I think because of the... Charles did do the speech in French, apparently. Is that correct? Crikey, man. It's only Thursday, and I've got the day wrong. I accused the king of not speaking in French because I'd read that he was going to, and then the clip they played on the news, he was speaking English. But now I'm thinking, why would they play the French clip on an English radio station? Of course he played the blooming English. Fair play to the king for doing the speech in French. What was the mistake I made earlier this morning? Uxbridge and Isleworth. I completely misnamed a constituency as well. I'm not even due a holiday for a while. And I've dropped the bit of the story that is most important to my actual proper telling of this, to my proper handling of this conversation. 11 minutes after 11 is the time. Class mobility is perceived to have become harder over the years. 32% say it's now very difficult to change class. So we've got two questions. Question number one is, do you honestly think you have changed class in your life? 0345 6060. No, that's not the question. What does it mean? What does changing class mean? 0345 6060 973. I think my parents... Well, actually, my mum gets cross with me when I say this. No one went to university in my family. I'd like to say until me, but my dad did an open university degree, so he could just beat me to the punch. But neither of my parents did A-levels or went to university. That is regarded as a class criterion, isn't it? I mean, it's on the list of things here. So if you went to university and your parents didn't, then you are perceived to have enjoyed a degree of social mobility. But if you end up earning less than your parents who didn't go to university, or if you are not likely to become a homeowner and your parents were, then what class are you? So there'll be a lot of young-ish people listening to this who went to university and who have white-collar jobs, who have less economic independence than their parents who didn't go to university and perhaps had blue-collar jobs. So what does social mobility mean in 2023? The more I talk about this, the more interesting the subject becomes. In fact, that little category there, well, it won't be little, that rather large category there of people who have some of the accoutrements of the middle class, the university education, the office job, but actually have less socioeconomic clout than parents who didn't go to university and don't have or didn't have office jobs. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. So what does that mean in 2023? What is class mobility in 2023? But crucially, why do so many people think that it is now harder to change class, to move up the ladder of life, as it were, than it was in 1983? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. I've done a thing here where the more I've talked about it, the more simple the question has become, which is the opposite of what usually happens. Because I think the question I want to ask is one I haven't asked you for years. We've done the detail, we've done the weeds on this kind of thing, and the specifics. Accents fascinate me as well, and prejudice. You know, the way that someone who's as thick as mince with a posh accent can inspire forelock tugging and cap doffing and even end up in Boris Johnson's cabinet, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, whereas someone who is as bright as a button but talks with a broad Brummie accent is going to struggle to convince swathes of the population of their innate intelligence. I don't know why that is, probably something to do with the legacy of Victorian times. But actually, I think we're going to let ourselves go all in on a biggie now. What does class mean in 2023? Because I can't answer the question of what social mobility is anymore because of those people that we've just identified. University-educated white-collar workers who earn less in relative terms and are considerably less likely to be property owners than their non-university-educated blue-collar parents. So what does class mean now? 50% of the population going to university. What does class mean in 2023? 0345 6060 973. Graham says, James, is it true you went to a school where dressage and beagling were on the syllabus? No, there was a pack of beagles, though, Graham. I know you've put a wink emoji, but I've told you this before. I don't think there was any dressage at my school, and none of it was on the syllabus. It was all extracurriculum. But you couldn't use that as a signifier. What class are you? Did your school have a pack of beagles? What question would you ask to determine what class somebody was in? You used to know roughly what it meant. I've got no idea what it means now. Oh, this will be fun. Do join in. It's 11:15. It is 18 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Accents and of course ethnicity. The notion of social mobility is going to change a lot according to your skin colour. But I found the first paragraph. You know what happened, don't you? The minute I said, whatever I said just before we went to the last junction, the little bit of paper that I was missing from this story fluttered in front of me. Class is seen as a bigger barrier in Britain than it was 40 years ago, a long-running survey reveals today. British Social Attitudes report, running for 40 years. Most Britons still see themselves as working class. No idea what that means because of the collapse of traditional industries. But when it comes to mobility, you'd usually compare yourself to your parents. But the chances are that doesn't fit any of the traditional measures anymore. So what do we even mean by the word? Kerry is in Glastonbury. Kerry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I just found it sort of resonated quite a lot with me because my parents, my mum is very working class, from what I understand. My dad started that way, but was very driven and worked his way up in the army, starting as a private, worked his way up to be an officer, gave me a very different upbringing to what he had, very keen on me going to boarding school and doing straight A's and everything. I had all the advantages, but I didn't really belong in that world.
Okay.
And then I got to go to
you felt
university.
You felt that? You felt you did?
Oh, massively. Oh, when I went there, my mum's from Yorkshire, and I had flat A's and said things like graph, and they all laughed.
Okay.
It's graph. Oh.
They didn't.
And,
they all laughed, actually.
They laughed. They laughed at me. And I quickly sort of adapted to try and fit in because it felt like this was the world you needed to be in and you needed to do well and fit in and in order to aspire. And then I got to go to university. My dad was very pleased and proud that we'd done that. My dad, like your dad, went to Open University technically before me whilst working as a soldier. So, and I just feel like I had that I got pushed into that world, but then actually my parents were the stable ones with the better savings and the better roots and rocks, and I'm a bit more of a freelancer who maybe got to do that because I was privileged, but now I'm not the sort of stable.
So economically, you mean, in terms of economic stability, your parents are on a higher rung of the ladder than you are?
Definitely. I feel like that maybe it's the generational thing of being better at saving or sort of having...
There was more to save because they didn't have to spend such a huge proportion of their income on property. That's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah, but it's weird because I just feel like I got my foot in both camps. I feel like I'm from so many different worlds, and I'm being Yorkshire, and my dad's half Chinese, and I'm quarter Chinese, and there's all this. It's like the things where there was this sort of to fit in.
What does the word mean to you then? Nothing really.
The class.
Yeah.
Class.
Yeah.
Well, no, it does because
Because we're not classless. Our society is riven with hierarchy and distinctions and unearned privilege. So class runs through the United Kingdom like it runs through a stick, like Blackpool through a stick of rock. But I can't today tell you exactly what it means, except for there is the upper class, who are people who live off private income or could live off private income, and that was true in Jane Austen's time. And then there is everybody else.
Yeah, but for me, I feel like it did massively because I felt like I was pushed into this world of generally quite upper class.
But they felt you would end up better off than them.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel guilty. Like, should I have done that? You know, should I have gone down the road of being a lawyer? Should I have done something
But
a
you'd
bit
still
more?
be you. I mean, you'd still have the education that you have, the priorities that you have. And also, there's loads of lawyers. I mean, crikey, unless you go into the city and you're essentially working with money, or you become a absolutely top-notch QC. There's not a great deal of money in the law anymore. Certainly not in barristry. Kerry, thank you. Every turn we take on this story makes it more complicated. Maybe it suits the upper class for us all to think of ourselves as being very strictly regimented. So I see the upper class as a socio-economic status. Even if you got the flattest vowels in the land, if you've got enough money, whether you inherited it or whether you made it yourself, to hang up your boots tomorrow and live off the interest, live off the income, live off the dividends, then you are not working class. However hard you try to convince yourself that you are working class, if you do not need to work, you are not working class. But even then, of course, there'll be lots of people who do not need to work but would not be able to knock it on their head and enjoy the kind of life that they want to live, so they carry on working. So, if working makes no measurable difference to your quality of life, all it does is make numbers grow in a bank account somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what it means anymore. Claire is in Cardiff. Claire, what do you think?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Long-time listener, first-time caller to your show. Absolutely buzzing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So am I now.
I am
Lovely.
so interested in this conversation because I went to university twice. I've got a master's degree in counselling psychotherapy and a theology degree. And my husband is a builder who grew up on a council estate.
Right.
And I think that the difference between class is to do with this set of rules that upper working and upper middle class people or middle class people operate their lives by. So I was really interested in what you just said about, like, if you earn loads and loads of money, even doing blue collar work, and so you didn't have to work tomorrow, then you wouldn't be working class anymore. I disagree. I think there are these set of rules that we can't really decipher or even articulate that mean that for some reason we would look down on someone who had flat bowels and who had earned their money from a blue collar job, even if we then consider
Didn't necessarily mean
class.
from a blue collar job. You could have earned it from owning a car.
They did.
Yes, okay. So you mean snobbery? Really?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I went to a school where there was a pony club and I've been skiing and I know how to operate at a dinner party. And I think that my husband has experienced social mobility because we have had conversations about what that looks like. And we've had weird, intangible conversations about this set of rules that exists that maybe he could live up into if he wanted to. But I don't think that social mobility is something that you can just get because
but then why would it have gone down?
Earn lots of money.
No,
I think it's gone down because
in 40 years. Why is it harder now?
I think it's gone down because of the presence of social media. So I think it's really clear and obvious to be able to say, look at my life. I live by this set of rules that looks like old money. And other people say, oh, I reject that. I'm going to live my life which looks like this. And so they are maybe even like proud of or happy and content in their working class status and would say, this is how I'm living my life, which is noticeably different. And I'm proud to be working class. And I'm going to project that image.
So I need a bit more detail. What do you mean, though? I mean, I don't know. I like your theory. I don't know that it necessarily fits the British Social Attitudes report, but that doesn't matter. What sort of things are you talking about? Are you? I mean, because it sounds as if you think that some people don't know how to use a knife and fork, and that would denote their class. And I'm sure you're not suggesting that. What are these rules that people wouldn't understand?
Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? I think that it's really difficult to explain what they are.
You must have a clue, Claire. You must have a clue.
Yeah, but I think I'm being cautious on the radio.
Well, I don't. Well, look, I went to a posh school. I don't know what you're talking about, if I'm honest. I mean, I know. So, I mean, you know, there's the silly stuff like how do you eat an artichoke or stuff like that. But generally speaking, if it's cutlery, you start at the outside and you work your way in. So, what is it?
But I think there are people that don't know that.
Well, you just tell them,
that.
And then they do.
But I think that stuff makes a difference if you've never been in an environment where you would be doing that.
But now you do. So you didn't yesterday, and now you do. So have you changed class in the moment of that exchange? What stuff?
No.
Don't be cautious. Just tell me what sort of stuff you're talking about, because I don't know, and I don't know what social media would have to do with it.
Well, I think that it's something about how people are able to say, I am working class and I'm proud of that and I want to stay working class.
But some of the most middle-class people I know insist that they're working class.
But so then they would be answering that study to say, no, I'm still working class.
But the measure of mobility, maybe there's been a death of aspiration because you can no longer associate social mobility with financial improvement. The actual, and this makes not a mockery of the survey, but it changes the parameters in which it's been conducted. Because when it started, changing class involved a change in socioeconomic status. But actually your analysis becomes powerful here because you might well have changed class, but your socioeconomic status hasn't necessarily changed at all. In fact, it might have gone down. You will be the university-educated, white-collar daughter of a property-owning, wealthier, blue-collar parent.
Yeah.
So then what has happened class-wise?
Who even knows? Who
even knows? That is it, isn't it? Possibly. That it no longer means aspiration by any other measure than whatever these mad words mean. Have you improved? Have you risen up the ladder of life from where your parents started? You go, yes, I suddenly have. I know how to eat an artichoke. But they're much better off than me. And they own their own home. They're mortgage-free. I'm paying rent to Dirty Bertie from number 30. So I wonder whether actually the problem here is not so much that background is now a bigger barrier to social mobility than in the 1980s, but that the relationship between aspiration and elevation has been completely exploded. Blimey. Andy's in Reading. Andy, what do you reckon?
I first of all would say that social mobility is the ability for you to go into any environment and feel able to interact with it. I had a chip on my shoulder. Yeah. I was from the north. I went to an incredibly privileged place to study medicine at Oxford, and my ability to do so was limited by the chip I had on my shoulder within that environment. And one of the things I got...
But you're an Oxford-educated doctor, so to anybody listening, there's no doubt at all about what class you're in, is there?
No, and this is what's interesting. Yes. One of the things I got from my degree in that place was the ability to interact with the people when I got to know them on a personal level, so that when I went to things that I'd never done before, and I went to the opera, and I went to, this boat party on the Thames with these people, I could just look at them as peers and equals, and I could walk in, and instead of being inhibited by that environment, I could just walk into it.
But then I've got mates from your background who can waltz into any room in the world and boss it like a social butterfly. And they're completely authentic. They're not putting anything on. And I went to a posh school and felt very nervous in many social situations, but I learned the skills of bolting on my game face.
My similarity with my experience and knowing a little bit about yourself, I mean, one of the things that shines through about you is that you would look at anybody from any background, whether they are the highest politician or anything else, and you could look at them with a casting eye and say, well, who are you? I don't have to just define you by the fact that you are the Prime Minister and some sort of deity. But
now I can. I don't know if I was... I definitely wasn't always like that, but I think this job has helped me become that person. I'm delighted that you've picked that up, actually.
Well, but that part of that surely has got to be from your background, going to such an elevated school, having contact with the people, and just realising, well, they're no actual difference to me.
Yes.
But you have, in some ways, in the same way as I had in that experience, got the chip off my own shoulder and then had that realisation that actually that's what you are, and you've been able to be, and as I have potentially, been slightly socially mobile because of those experiences. So what I wanted to say is that in some degree, the thing that would hold back people's class or social mobility is exposure, it's opportunity, it's the ability to interact with certain people or environments, and the privilege that comes with middle and upper class isn't just about wealth, it's about exposure, privilege, and the ability to have contact with environments that would set you up for future opportunities.
Yes, well, that's true, which makes it harder perhaps to understand why it would have gone into decline over the last 40 years. Why is there less social mobility now than there was in 1983?
Well, I mean, society just seems more polarised, doesn't it? Everyone seems to have a tag. I slightly disagree with what you were earlier. Some of the most middle-class people I know define themselves as lower class or working class. Well, actually, you have a right to surely define yourself in any way that you would want to.
Of course you do. Yeah, you do, of course, but we're discussing what you might describe as objective categorisations, i.e. a sort of broad consensus on what these words mean. And I'm not sure in 2023 that they mean much that can be measured, and that's because of the relationship between aspiration and elevation has probably almost gone.
Well, I think to a certain degree, people are quite polarised. They don't have a problem. The person mentioned social media. To a certain degree, somebody would see somebody define in a certain way and will have that exposure, and they would relate to it and say, yes, I'll define myself in that way too. Thank you. I would like that. I agree with that. And if people are quite polarised and, variability to say, this is what I am, it creates that almost a society where people are more polarised and less likely to interact with each other because I'm this and you're that.
And they might be mobile or they might be mobilised, but they wouldn't use that language to describe it themselves. I wonder whether...
Just listening to what you said about previous subjects on the radio on earlier, it's actually quite interesting. There was loads of polarising terms, whether you're Brexiteer, whether you're a Remainer, whether you are right-wing, whether you're left-wing, whether you're...
But none of that's class-related, I don't think.
Yeah, but it's all about that moment where people are likely to
you don't get snobbery. I'm really late for the news, which is a shame because you've got my little grey cells whirring away, but it is actually 11:33. 11:36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mystery Hour on the way at 12, of course. I think this is breaking news. Next public meeting with the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is to be moved from central London amid security concerns, so-called anti-ULEZ protests, which I have witnessed. I've hosted similar events for the Mayor of London, and it's funny because when he describes some of the protesters that he and I have encountered at these events as being far-right adjacent, he's not suggesting that everyone who's got a problem with ULEZ is far-right, which, of course, his political opponents pretend, including the Enoch Powell fan, that is the Conservative candidate. He is simply suggesting that under the guise of an anti-ULEZ protest, some people possessed of deeply unpleasant positions with regards particularly to ethnic minorities or Muslims turn up. And I can categorically assure you that that's true, partly because of what they chant or shout in the hall where I am hosting, and partly because of what it says on their hats in a few cases. But I can't expect honest coverage, I suppose, of anything involving Sadiq Khan, except that the police have advised that the security risk, the hostile atmosphere, will prompt a change of location. So well done, everybody. 38 minutes after 11 is the time. Back to the question of class. Here's a really interesting... There's nothing wrong with flat vowels, Deborah. No one suggested that there was, but other people will judge you because of your flat vowels if they are snobs. As I was talking to you about class, I just had a little look at Twitter during the news headlines. Here's something mad, right? Here's something truly mad, which I can't even begin to explain to you. There must be some sort of evolutionary need for hierarchy into which we all buy without knowing it. And of course, whether you want to buy into it or not, that's the society you inhabit. But King Charles has gone walkabout in Paris with Emmanuel Macron. And the crowd seemed to be quite healthy. Healthier perhaps than they would be here for a common or garden walkabout, but then I suppose we get more opportunities to do it. But there are French people in Paris shouting audibly on the clip that I watched, shouting, Vive le roi. Vive le roi! They're shouting, Vive le roi! Which not only, it means long live the king. In France, in 2023, we're having a conversation about how hard it is to pin down class, and our actual king, the bloke what rides around in a jewelled carriage with a diamond on his head, is now visiting a country where they killed their king, they chopped his head off and replaced it with a republic, and members of that, citizens of that state, liberté, égalité, fraternité, they are shouting, long live the king, in French, at our king. Vive le roi! They're shouting. So now you perhaps understand why it is quite hard to pin down what class means. Carolyn in Hertford's going to have a go. Carolyn, what would you like to say?
Hello. I thought I was going to die of nerves waiting.
It's only sorry. I should have come to you quicker. Vive le roi!
Well, the answer to when did this start to fall apart is to one name, Margaret Thatcher.
Go on.
I was born in the 50s, brought up in the 60s and 70s, and during that time there was a lot of class mobility.
Yes.
And I was one of the lucky ones. I went to grammar school, and that helped me. I'm still working class in my heart and very much in my head, because I haven't quite crossed that boundary where I feel at ease.
What is the boundary?
With other people.
There's lots of people who think they're middle class who don't feel at ease with other people. But
oh, right, well, maybe that's it. But I certainly feel, I can't speak up as much as I would like to.
Okay.
Anyway, so along came Margaret Thatcher in 1979. She removed all the safety net from the lower earning people.
Right.
And now they clamped down on... I don't know whether she did, but the Tory party from then clamped down on support for education. So they locked kids in to continue as their parents have done. And they basically put the tin hat on social mobility, and it's got worse ever since then.
But Labour turned it round on the education front.
Well, they did, but it's all gone again now.
Yes,
and for a time, the education thing did work, and that's where it starts. I was a teacher, but I do know that I felt that change when Margaret Thatcher came in, and it grieved me deeply.
And yet, you know, some people would argue that there had been more mobility. I mean, things like buying your council house turns you from a non-property owner to a property owner.
Except that I never got as far as a council house. Lived in a damp, wet dump with no electricity.
No, I know,
and
but
there
that's
weren't any council houses.
That's you. I'm talking about the broader social trend of extending property ownership to people who would never have previously dreamt of it. Oh, have we lost the phone line there? Or have I bored Carolyn into submission? That's a shame. She was so nervous before coming on. Carolyn, thank you if you can hear me. 11:42. I promise. I make sure she knows I didn't cut her off or anything like that. Will you ring her back? Mark's in Chester. Mark, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. How are you?
You did that on purpose, that pause then, didn't you? You made me think that all my phone lines had gone south. Yeah, I'm very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I'm not that smart, but I called in. I've just returned to England from living in the US the last 23 years. And my observation is there's a lot less classism and elitism in the USA. There's lots of good and bad about America.
Yes, of course.
One of the things I did like was the fact that there's less classism. And instead of thinking of it as working class or middle class or upper class, I think in America especially, they would probably think of it as, maybe you've got a blue-collar job, you work with your hands. There's a poverty line, so people that are below that maybe are struggling for different reasons. But in terms of people that are employed, you've got blue-collar jobs and then you've got white-collar jobs. If you're a plumber and you have a blue-collar job and you earn $1 million, your money and your success in your trade is viewed upon as favourably as if you're a surgeon doing the same thing and earning $1 million with a white-collar job. Likewise, you could be very smart and you could be in academia or something, and you could have maybe a white-collar job, and you might be struggling to pay the bills from week to week and paying the rent and putting food in the fridge. And
but is there it still exists a bit, doesn't it, when they talk about WASPs and when they talk about, they do have concepts of old money and the Mayflower and all of those signifiers, but simply by the nature of the diaspora, there's no earthly way that it can define society as tightly as it does in this country.
Yeah, and I think, the old money and maybe some of the older cities, like if I'd have spent time in Boston, exactly, that's an example I was going to give. Yes, I'm sure there's some cliques there and some elitism there, but generally speaking, people are viewed based on their success. There's more onus on self-accountability and self-reliance, so don't rely on anyone else to make you successful. You're successful off your own back. Now, white privilege and whether everyone has a fair shake, that's a different conversation. But the onus is definitely put onto the individual to go out and be successful. And if they are, generally speaking, it doesn't matter if, as I said, if you're a plumber or a surgeon or an engineer or a school teacher.
You wouldn't have snobbery. So we're talking really about snobbery in the way that we have it here, or the idea that...
I think that's probably a yes. And
in the same way. I think that's probably true.
The accent and the vowels is probably another thing that is you get less of.
Is there a posh thing? Is there such a thing as a posh American accent?
So if you're in mid-Ohio, which is, I guess, the closest thing to a neutral American accent, at one time if you were on the TV or if you're a broadcaster, they wanted you to have that accent. So you had a fairly neutral, bland kind of accent. I think over the last 20 years, I think that's probably got watered down a little bit.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be posh. It would just be neutral.
Yes, that's very true.
There's no such thing as a posh, because we think, I don't know if the phrase is offensive or not, I hope not, but we think of a redneck, we think of Deliverance, or we've all got an idea of what a below the poverty line accent. I know, because that's state specific, isn't it? And there'll be people in other states who are just as poor as people in the deep south, but who don't have the accent association. But it might be one for Mystery Hour, whether or not there is such a thing as a posh American accent. Thank you, Mark. A couple of phone lines free now, if you're quick. 0345 60973 is the number that you need. The time is 11:46. It's 11:49. Mystery Hour next. If you're not familiar with that posh, with that feature of the programme, I dare say that you're in for a bit of a treat. That kind of transatlantic drawl is a posh American accent, isn't it? Or maybe just the Boston accent, I'm not sure. Larchmont Lockjaw. To give you an idea, you talk with the teeth kind of clenched together. But then what, you got a really broad American Texan accent? I don't know. Liz is in Wimbledon. Hello, Liz.
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well. What would you like to say?
Yeah, what I want to do is I want to come at this from a slightly different angle.
Go on, then. Do you need to adjust your seat?
Well, I was doing something really boring. I've had to go somewhere else to talk to you.
Carry on.
So yeah, there's been a bit of adjusting. I want to make it a little bit personal, but there's a reason for that. Okay. I'm not going to stay in the personal. I think that the personal circumstances of my kind of family and my life actually speak to the influences that I think are at play here.
Yes.
So I think this is a lot more about an increase in an ethnic diverse population than you've touched on so far.
Go on.
And I'll explain why I think that's the case, particularly over the last 40 years.
Yes.
So I'm a white British woman married to a British Sri Lankan. So
very nice chap he is too.
Well, we could talk about that another time.
Go on.
Phone in about that. And his parents came here in the 60s. He was born here, blah, blah, blah. But what's significant is that his parents were very much interested in getting him a ticket. You might call it a golden ticket into the British middle class. And so they put everything they could into sending him and his brothers to public school and hoping that they could make his class, not his education, I mean the class, the connections that came from public school.
This is aspiration in the simplest sense.
Yeah,
really.
So I'm specifically not talking about exam results and grades. I'm talking about the people, the milieu. They thought that if they bought that, it would offset his colour.
Right, gosh.
And so that's his story.
Yes.
And then my story is working class parents didn't go to uni, EastEnders left school at 16 because there wasn't any money, etc., etc.
Yeah.
My sister and I, first generation university, so we had the brains and did well sort of academically, but undoubtedly have a working class background.
But remember, you could go to university without taking out epic amounts of debt, which isn't true anymore. So that's another factor we've missed, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you don't have enough time for this, but yes, that's a whole other cul-de-sac because there's no way either of us would have been to university if you had to pay. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Whereas that wouldn't be the case with my husband. And so what then happened is my sister and I were able to be very socially mobile because we got the right qualifications.
Right.
Perhaps not if we tried to enter the law or a profession where your class background mattered more.
Okay.
But there's no doubt that my parents were socially mobile and so were we. But my husband has not been because he has hit this race ceiling many times in his life. And the other thing I want to draw in, which I think does kind of make the point, rather than me just sort of playing a tiny violin about what may have happened to him, is we have a daughter who's obviously mixed race.
I do.
My daughter.
Yes.
But she's white presenting. Horrible phrase, but it explains how she looks.
Right.
And she went to a state school. So her parents didn't pay for the golden ticket, etc., etc. He found that quite difficult because he thought that might be the only way, but I convinced him with charm and argument that, it would be fine. Yes. She went to a state school, then went to Oxford, did a master's at Oxford, is kind of flying in the stratosphere. And she would attribute that not just to being bright and working hard, but her peers at Oxford, who were people of colour, did not have the same success.
Oh, really?
And even the ones who went to public school and knew how to drink the port glass, which she didn't, and where the knives and forks were, have a much harder time. Because what she had, she might not have had class capital, but she had white cultural capital. And so I think the 40 years decline is a lot more to do with the fact that there are many, many more people who aren't white.
Oh,
who
chasing
as socially mobile as white people who've had the same
So
education.
frustrated aspiration, not actually frustrated by something that has changed within society, but frustrated by something that has stayed the same. We're just seeing an increase in the number of frustrated people.
Yeah, and just to sort of shoot down my own argument, it has also changed during that time because one of my husband's brothers is 10 years younger than him. And his experience of racism and a race ceiling, if you like, in a career is entirely different.
Oh, well, that's good.
He's had a much easier ride, in inverted commas, and not faced as many barriers because within that 10 or 15 years, British society did become less racist.
Unfortunately,
than it was before.
Direction of traffic.
I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we've gone backwards
6
again.
or 7. I think you might be right, unfortunately. But I hadn't thought of it like that, and that's a really helpful perspective, Liz. Thank you. You give my love to Mia, yeah? Make sure.
Yeah, I will do. I mean, she works in this area now. She's literally working every day to try and get people of colour further up the ladder.
And there it is. That idea of the ladder is still very, very real, but it's possibly not the same ladder for everybody, which is a crucial part of understanding all of this. And the notion of mobility being frustrated by ethnicity or sexuality or any other kind of minority status is not going to be the most obvious explanation for the broader phenomenon, but it's going to be an absolutely intrinsic part of it. 11:55 is the time. Thank you, Liz. Tom is in Doncaster. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Pleasure to speak to you. Long-term listener, first-time caller.
Thank you, mate. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I think nowadays there's more layers to the sort of generic working middle upper class.
Yes.
And I think that the general working class aspire to move up one little ladder within working class rather than the impossible dream over the clouds of middle class and upper class. I think of my own parents. They're quite a good example of when you think of class and social mobility. So my dad had 3 jobs in his working life. He was a work down pit, he was a window cleaner, and he was a postman.
Right.
My mum was a dinner lady and a postman. But they both managed to retire at 55.
Yeah, you see.
And this year they're going on or been on 9 holidays this year, which I call them Judith Chalmers and Alan Wicker.
9? But that's because they had fantastic pensions, right? Which is not going to be true of your children or our children.
Or me.
or ours actually. And that so you say there's more and more layers. I think there's fewer and fewer.
Yeah.
I think there's either people that you're bringing retirement into it now, which is slightly complicating factors. But you can either live comfortably with no work or you can't.
Well, yeah. They obviously got to a point where they wanted to maintain their sort of the standard of living, so they worked to that point, and then
they knew they were over the line. They knew they were golden. What class would they say? What class would they describe themselves as? Because by some of the signifiers you've described, they're working class all the way.
I mean, they're obviously. I'd call them working class because the background, miners and.
But socioeconomically, they're golden.
Yeah, me and my wife, we both went to university.
Yes.
We both got white jobs. We're both earning more money now than my dad ever earned in his life annually.
But
we've done to retire at 55.
Yeah.
And that goes on 9 holidays a year when they're at 64.
Yeah. So who is who? Who is who? You're the middle class one. You're the working class one. But they're sort of waving to you from their latest cruise ship while you're putting in another shift at the metaphorical coalface as opposed to the actual coalface, which is where your dad worked back in the day. Tom, perfect. I think really perfect illustration of what I was trying to pin down. I'll squeeze in one more. I've only got a minute, Terry, so you'll have to make it snappy in Nuneaton. What would you like to say?
Okay, I'll make it quite quick. Sometimes what I believe is that it's where you're born, the time period you're born, the social events which is happening within that region that allows you social mobility. I'll give a quick example. I went to university. Dropped out because I was trying to do microelectronics. They were teaching me electrical stuff.
Right.
Then I went for an interview for a prestigious company. Then when I got into the interview, I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this because of my background.
Right.
Turns out that the guy that's interviewing me had a social connection with me based on where he was brought up. I got the job.
Yeah, and that I mean, the point there, Terry, whether you intend it or not, and I think you probably do, is that if you go to a school like mine, then the likelihood of ending up in a room with someone interviewing you with whom you have a social connection is absolutely huge. And that's one thing we've missed entirely from this conversation. I'll tell you how you divide British society. I literally, and this brings in every single factor of the conversation that we've had, except perhaps Liz's, actually, although that would also apply. It's the reason why her parents-in-law sent her husband to the school they did. There are two types of people in the United Kingdom. There are people, when they meet somebody new, who ask what school they went to. And there are people who don't. And that, I think, is the most fundamental distinction and division in our so-called class structure. And that is the end of my TED Talk. Mystery Hour's next.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Is it that time already? And not just, I mean, it's probably because I got the day wrong yesterday. I'm surprised that Thursday, 12 noon on a Thursday, has crept up upon us so quickly. A lot of love coming in for Liz, actually. I should pass that on, the final caller there, which was a particularly pertinent contribution to the conversation. But that line about asking people what school they went to, which I somewhat uncomfortably was my own, is probably the key distinguisher between what we would loosely refer to as classes. 3 minutes after 12 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And we are diving headfirst into Mystery Hour. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere on your radio dial. The reason I sound a bit distracted is because the switchboard just exploded. Some weeks it does and some weeks it doesn't, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with what I say or do, which is a little bit discombobulating, to be honest with you. I would remind you that there is a thingamajig, a wonderful prize of a Mystery Hour board game. It's a really, really good board game, actually. I think I made a mistake of being so gobsmacked by the fact that a board game had sprung organically from this sort of slightly odd radio feature that for a while some people thought I was joking. They thought Keith was a figment of my imagination, and I'm not yet prepared to confirm or deny whether that is true or false. But the board game is 100% real. Go and have a look at it at mysteryhour.co.uk. And if you're not lucky enough to win one by being my favourite contributor of today, you can buy your own. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. We will, I think, just crack on. Have I forgotten everything? Terms and conditions are at lbc.co.uk. So that's two websites I should always mention at the outset of Mystery Hour. lbc.co.uk for the terms and conditions regarding the competition to win a copy of the board game, and mysteryhour.co.uk to get your own copy of it as well. And you're not allowed to Google anything, but I haven't mentioned that for months. It seems to have sort of become self-policing, I think. Anyway, we shall see. Alice is in Northwich. Alice, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Alice.
How does a self-sourcing pudding work?
Ah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
So I think I know, but I mean, shush. So you mean the batter, a homogeneous batter goes into the oven and it comes out with a sponge top and a soggy bottom and a liquid bottom?
Well, yes, you put the batter in the bowl,
yes,
and then you have to pour a mixture of boiling water and sugar over the top of it before it goes in the oven. And then miraculously, whilst it's cooking, the liquid goes to the bottom and the pudding rises to the top.
Wow, but if you left it in for longer, it would be a cake.
Well, it'd be a very soggy cake.
Yeah, but I think I'm very, very partial to a self-sourcing pudding, although I've never called it that before. It's the same stuff, or is it? Or no, because it could be. Is it creating a sponge that rises through and leaves behind a liquidy residue?
That's the clever thing. So I know it's chemistry, but I can't quite work out how it is that the pudding manages to set and rise through the liquid instead of just.
Yeah, but that's not. I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure.
Going soggy.
Yeah, I'm not sure that is what's happening. I think that the crust is forming on the top like a pie, and that the liquid underneath is actually still the same stuff that the crust is made of. It's just uncooked.
But the sauce is not just boiling water and sugar.
No.
The sauce also has the flavour. So if you make a chocolatey one,
yes,
you get a lovely chocolatey sauce.
Yes, but you've got a lovely chocolatey sponge as well.
Well, you do have that, yes. But I mean,
so it's the same. Now I want to use the word sauce, but it's different meaning. SOURCE. The source of the sauce is the same sauce as the sponge, Alice.
Now you're just getting ridiculous.
We got Dick Emery's son rang in the other day. We need him to come back on and go, saucy. And we'd be exactly where. But it is the same sauce, isn't it? The sauce and the sponge have the same sauce.
Yes, but you have to get the proportions absolutely correct, or else it wouldn't work.
Yes.
And
that's what recipes are for.
Well, of course, we've got a recipe, but that doesn't explain the chemistry of it.
No, it doesn't. We need a chef.
You might have a chef listening.
There's always chefs listening, but they'll be on service now. It's 8 minutes after 12, so I'm sure one of them will take a moment out. Right, you're on, Alice. I shall try and get you. How do self-sourcing puddings self-source?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. Chris is in Exeter. Chris, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
So, when you have a drink, any liquid,
yes.
Does the body prioritise where that liquid is needed most?
I like this question. So if you've got a massive hangover and your cheeks are like sandpaper, and you neck a jug of water, why don't your cheeks get more juicy immediately?
Yeah, because they say when you have a dry mouth, that's the first sign of dehydration. That's your body saying, have a drink.
Is it?
When you, Ray Mears and the other fella.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I have a dry mouth and I have a drink, my mouth isn't. So
how does how does the water know where to? So where does the water? So you drink, you're dehydrated. Where does the water go first?
Yeah, how does the body prioritise it, or does it prioritise?
It's a great question. It's a really good question. 9 minutes after 12 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to provide the answer. I stopped making the promise for a one laugh out loud moment every week on this. But it's nice that Phil is still counting and he's already had his. I used to say, I might start saying it again, I guarantee that by 1 o'clock today, you will know more than you do now. This is every Thursday from 12. I like to think it applies to every hour that we spend together, but this hour in particular. And also, you will have one laugh out loud moment. I'll just take this. I don't deal with text much during this part of the programme, but I'll tell you, what the heck is a self-sourcing pudding? I should have explained. So you've got a bowl, and you put your batter in a bowl, like one homogeneous bowl full of batter, and then you put it in the oven, and when you take it out, you've got a sponge pudding top and a wet sauce bottom. So a self-sourcing pudding. So it's not like you put your sauce in and you put your pastry on top or your sponge on top. It's just one thing. It's one, what's the word I'm looking for? It's one thing. It's not one ingredient. It's one thing. It's one substance that you make. You mix together flour, eggs, cocoa, flour, sugar, lots of sugar. And you stick it in the oven, thinking that it will come out like a cake or a mousse, but actually it's cake on top, liquid underneath. Business at the front, party at the back. It's the mullet of puddings, isn't it, really? Matt's in Chesterfield. Matt, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
I want to know why we find beauty in inanimate objects. What's the point? What's the evolutionary benefit to find a waterfall beautiful, for example?
What a lovely
or a sports
question.
Car?
What a beautiful question.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to think what it might be. I mean, we find people attractive, don't we? I know they're not inanimate, but could it be a similar sort of beauty?
See, you can't procreate with a stately home or a sunset. What's the point?
Don't tell Jacob Rees-Mogg that. He the stately home bit. He's still trying to procreate with a penny farthing every Friday night. What is the? Sorry, they're looking. What do you remember lockdown?
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about lockdown, I didn't notice it until about halfway through, is that I really missed big skies.
Uh-huh.
I really missed that sense of smallness in the universe, and so it's going to be something to do with mental health, isn't it? It's going to have something to do with releasing some hormone or just relaxing something beautiful, looking at something beautiful. Giving us
I lived in the Middle East, James, for a while, and when I flew back to Manchester, the green from the aeroplane window was pleasing to my eyes.
Yeah. You're on. I don't. Why do we derive pleasure from the view, really? Isn't it? Regardless of
the view and a waterfall. And
well, that's still a view. That's still a view. The view you're looking at it's a view. Something you see gives you emotional pleasure.
Indeed.
Well, I like that. I mean, who's going to be able to answer that? God only knows, but we will endeavour to find out both what the answer is and who's going to answer it. 0345 6060 973. Thank you, Matt. 12:12 is the time. John's in Islington. John, question or answer?
There's a question for you, James.
Carry on, John.
Large vehicles, lorries.
Whoa, 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 whoa. No, hang on. Keith. This is Jake's not done this before, mate. We've got a inexperienced producer on this programme, deeply experienced elsewhere, who's going to be looking out for motoring questions. It can't be him. That's not the point, is it? John, we don't really do motoring questions, mate.
Yeah, well, you'll do this one because you love me.
Is it like hardcore, absolutely inescapable motoring question? We can't pretend it's philosophy or something else.
Yeah, it's more specifically about their wheels.
It's a question about bloody wheels?
It's wheels.
All right, then. Well, you're here now, aren't you? It'd be rude to bin you off 7 times. Go on.
Big vehicles, hubcaps, the front wheels stick out and the back wheels go in.
Right.
Why? You Google any picture of a London bus or a lorry and you'll see the front wheels, hubcaps stick out.
Yeah.
Go in.
Yeah. That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, actually, John.
Told you.
No, you did. So the hub, is it the hubcap or just the wheel nuts? The whole cap sticks out.
It's the whole cap, yeah.
So if you were looking at it like straight ahead, you've got the tyre, and then you've got a bit sticking out below and above the bottom and the top and the bottom of the tyre, and then at the back of the vehicle, you wouldn't see anything except the tyre.
It goes in, yeah, exactly.
All right, I don't know. I'll find out for you. How am I going to jot this one down in my notes? So John, wheel hubs. Wheel hubs. Wheel hubs is fine. Yeah, hubs. Thank you, John. Don't take that as any form of softening on my rule that we never have motoring questions. Yeah, Keith points out we have actually done them. What was the motoring topic we did the other day? We did ULEZ. Yeah, but why people love their cars isn't a motoring topic, Keith. It's philosophy and psychology, isn't it? It's a sort of human nature. It's a question about why we do the things we do. It's not a question about parking tickets or motorway lanes. It's 12:15. 12:17 is the time. I don't normally interrupt Mystery Hour for politics, but someone called Andrew Bowie, who has got a tick, so he must be an actual MP up in Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, has tweeted this morning, "We'll never impose unnecessary and heavy-handed measures on the British people." And then he's got a lovely red cross, like a big X, and it says, "No taxes on eating meat." And then another X, "No new taxes to discourage flying. No diktats about sorting your rubbish into 7 different bins or car sharing. No orders to get expensive insulation upgrades." There are days and there are days, aren't there, where you sort of think, I know how mad everything is. I know Brexit broke the relationship between observable reality and political rhetoric. I know that democracy can never recover until people telling lies stop being rewarded with the votes of the people being lied to. And I know that none of that can happen while most of the media consists of sycophants and clients. But the day on which an actual Prime Minister would come out and announce a ban on something that didn't exist is not a day I ever thought would dawn. I already worry that with 6 weeks until publication, my new book, How They Broke Britain, is going to be out of date because the madness, the lunacy, the absurdity and the corruption that it describes is in danger of being overtaken by events. We're all right so far, but I wish I'd had time to include, even in the last line of the book, it would have been a perfect last line, because Liz Truss is the last chapter. It ends with her being slung out and Rishi Sunak coming in, and I could have said within a year or within 18 months, Rishi Sunak would be promising to ban things that didn't exist. So early hopes that he might mark some sort of change with the recent past were dashed. They were dashed the minute he reappointed Suella Braverman, of course. But the level of madness, I'm afraid, is the only word I can think of, that it takes not only to announce a ban of something that doesn't exist, but then to get these weird little MPs and client journalists queuing up to cheer it. He's banned meat taxes. Oh, good old Rishi banning meat taxes. Where are the meat? There aren't any. Some days, as I say, you just do not know, do you? 19 minutes after 12 is the time. I think we'll put Andrew Bowie in Idiot's Corner. Although he hasn't contacted the show directly, his tweet has flashed in front of me. There's a rather brilliant reply to it, actually, by a Twitter account called Supertansky, it's Tanya, who's rung into the programme a couple of times. I enjoy her work on Twitter. She says, Andrew, help. I'm stuck in a car share on the way to the airport with 7 bins full of meat. This is serious. Please reply. It's very hot in here due to all the black market insulation. This is an emergency. That's very funny. 20 minutes after 12. Richard's on the Algarve. Richard, question or answer?
It's a question.
Yes.
I would like to know how words that are peculiar to foreign languages are signed in British Sign Language.
Why would you like to know that, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's a very good question. It's because my wife says it's a stupid question, so you have to ring that bloke up on the radio and he'll find the answer.
But you framed the question before your wife was so unconscionably rude to you, Richard. So where did your interest come from?
Yeah, it was just one of those things. We were talking about sign language. My wife has wanted to learn sign language. I said, well, so we have words in Portuguese that don't translate directly. I said, well, how would you say that?
In English, like what?
Well, in Portuguese, the best word I can think of is saudades, it's often translated as homesick, but it's not homesick. Because, for example, you would say that you have saudades for your mum's cooking or saudades for the smell of the grass when your dad's cutting it. It's not homesick.
So it's a relationship between missing something and home, but not missing home itself.
Yeah, you can even say you have saudades for a meal that you haven't eaten for a long time. It's not necessarily homesick. It's a complicated...
So it's nostalgia. It's a great word. So the Greeks have a word philoxenia, which we would translate as hospitality, but it means much more than hospitality. It's almost like a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility to a guest, to look after them. I imagine the answer will be you just go for the nearest word. But I would ask.
That's not a translation. I mean, for example, I'll give you one more example.
I know it's not.
Schadenfreude. How would you translate that into English, into BSL?
Yeah.
That's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. I mean, because you couldn't say taking pleasure in other people's misfortune because you'd be here all week.
Exactly.
So peculiar foreign words peculiar to a foreign language that don't have a direct British translation, how would they work in sign language?
Yes.
I like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think your wife is wrong as well, Richard, for the record.
She's often wrong, but it's rare I can tell her.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful. 22 minutes after 12. Of course, this is Mystery Hour, so there is always the danger of a violent reverse after I say something's very silly and it turns out it's not, or I say that's a very good question and events transpire to deliver the conclusion that it doesn't. Colin gets this. A few people have sent in various iterations of this joke, but I'm going to choose Colin's, partly because I forgot to read them out earlier. Colin writes that in the 2024 Conservative Manifesto there is going to be a ban on dragons and magic. I think that we're possibly giving them ideas there, Colin, and of course a ban on dragons might deplete the cabinet somewhat, so they'd have to be careful about that. It is 23 minutes after 12. Neil is on in South Hams in Devon. Neil, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
42.
That's not the question, though, is it? Clever clogs.
No, it's not. No, the answer's about the self-sourcing pudding.
Now, hang on. I may have made a mistake here, because some people are telling me there's a self-sourcing pudding where you pour a sugar and water syrup over the batter and cook it, whereas I was describing something different from that. What are you describing? The one I described or the one that my texts are telling?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you go first.
So what I think you're talking about is hot chocolate fondant, which is the chocolate sponge with the chocolate sauce in the middle.
That's what I was talking about, but I'm not sure that's what Alice was talking about. But go on.
I can explain the other one for you as well.
Oh, perfect. Go on then.
So the hot chocolate fondant, the vast majority of people, certainly in the UK, will have seen is, you were right, an uncooked sponge.
Yeah.
The original came from a chef called Michel Bras who was a 3 Michelin star chef in France, and his recipe was called biscuit coulant. So basically, the outside was a denser sponge. It had things like rice flour in it, things like that, and then it had a ganache in the middle. So you would make the ganache. So the chocolate ganache like you would normally make, but instead of using cream, you would use water and cream. So when you then chilled it, so you had to chill it sort of almost above freezing so it didn't go grainy, you then put that into the ring, which was lined with parchment paper. You put the batter in to make for the sponge on the outside, and then you cut the ganache and you put that in the middle and you baked it. So it was two separate entities. It was two.
So that's not a self-saucing pudding. That's the opposite of a self-saucing.
Well, it is. Yeah. No, because when you cut into it, it had a proper chocolate sauce inside it.
But it's not self-saucing.
Whereas, well, yeah, it is, because when you present it, it comes out and it looks like the chocolate fondant that most people in this country would see, which would look like a sponge.
I don't want to get stuck on this. But I think we understood a self-saucing pudding. Oh, okay. I think I understand what you mean, but that's definitely not what Alice meant. She's
talking about where, like a creme caramel.
No, she's not. She's talking about like, I mean, you're the expert, but you make a batter.
Yeah.
And when you take it out, you only stick a bowl of one thing in the oven, but when it comes out, there's a sauce underneath and a sponge on top.
So basically, what happens? The batter then separates.
So it's uncooked. So it's uncooked batter at the bottom.
Yes, sort of. Yeah, because what happens is when you obviously heat the batter up, the batter becomes less viscose, and then the sauce elements drop to the bottom. So as you continue to cook it, the sponge obviously then sits on top of the sauce elements. When you turn the bowl out, the sauce.
So there's stuff in the ingredients. So they do separate the stuff. So if you did a chemical analysis of the sponge and the sauce, they wouldn't be identical.
No.
Okay.
No, they would still contain same elements.
Of course.
But the heavier ones would obviously then drop to the bottom.
And there wouldn't be any baking powder or flour in the sauce, would there? Or nowhere near as much, because that's cooked now.
No, because that. So the baking powder
really
would.
Interesting. Butter. So you're talking butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and then carbonated soda and baking powder, or a combination of both, and then your flavour, whether it's chocolate or lemon or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Caramel.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Now, what the other one is where you make a batter and you put a sort of syrup on the top of it before you put it in the oven. Have you heard it? It would be the same principle, actually, wouldn't it? Actually.
It would just, all it would happen would be, so if you're putting it on the top, and then in the bowl, when you turn the bowl out, the sauce is then at the bottom of the bowl. So when you turn it out, it then sauces over the top, like the creme caramel we talked about earlier, where, the caramel. Because if you make a creme caramel, this would be the similar sort of thing. When you actually make the creme caramel, you pour hot caramel into the ramekin.
Yes.
And it's hard. It's rock hard.
That's right.
So then when you cook it and you turn it out, it then has the caramel sauce, but you've not effectively done anything to it other than cook it in a bain-marie in the oven. So, it's the same principle. So all you're doing is you are cooking it in the oven.
The sauce
elements.
Yeah, except that the sauce hasn't gone through the custard, has it?
No,
in the way that it has on a self-saucing pudding.
So in the creme caramel, the caramel's on the bottom, and then you pour your custard mix on the top, bake it in the bain-marie. The caramel so it then taints what is the bottom.
Yes.
When the custard sets.
I don't know that this is helpful to the self-saucing question bit. It's great to know. I don't think it's the same at all.
Well, your self-saucing
because the caramel would have to pass all the way through the self-saucing pudding. I mean, the mystery is how come it's so dry at the top and wet at the bottom? And the answer is, well, it rose up, dried out, and the wet bit stayed at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
And even if you pour a syrup over the top of it after you've put it in the oven, the same thing is happening. It's rising up, and the syrup is falling through the sponge, through the developing sponge.
When it heats.
Through the developing sponge.
So as if you ever do this with your kids, like cook, I don't know, cupcakes or whatever, put a frozen cherry on top of the cupcake mix,
Yeah.
and then put it in the oven, and you will see the frozen cherry drop, because when you heat up, before the sponge mix solidifies and aerates,
Yeah.
it goes liquid.
It can
So
get
that's
the chance to
essentially what
fall
happens
through it.
with
There it is.
your syrup.
Yeah, even though it sits on the top at the start, by the time it is cooking, it will it changes physically and it falls through. Qualifications.
27 years as a Michelin-starred, 27 years in Michelin-starred kitchens, and now an award-winning web designer.
That'll do nice. Well, that's an interesting career change, but it's earned you a round of applause, Neil. Well played, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Talk all day about pudding. I mean, creme caramel is a really nice thing to make, but my goodness me, the egg yolks and cream and sugar, that is like, that is some serious cooking when you're making that, some serious cholesterol. My dad used to call it, you have a fry-up sometimes, he'd call it a heart attack on a plate. And when you make creme caramel, or even the late Gary Rhodes had some amazing recipes. He made a bread and butter pudding. He had a recipe for a bread and butter pudding where the custard was basically creme caramel custard. I don't know whether that's normal or not. It's the only one I've ever made. But my goodness me, it made your teeth itch. I think we might have. Alice in Northwich is pleased. She's texted me. She's happy with the answer. I think we've opened a box of frogs there. I really did. Box of frogs? I think we've opened a Pandora's box of frogs. I don't know on the self-sourcing pudding. Neil definitely deserved his round of applause, but judging by my inbox, there are many other directions in which we could have gone. Questions still in need of answers include, when you're dehydrated and you glug some water, where does it go first? Which part of you gets rehydrated first? Don't say your mouth, obviously, but as in the rehydration process, once you've swallowed it. Don't say your tummy. You know what I mean, all right? So, okay. Why do we derive pleasure from looking at beautiful things? Oh, that reminds me, you can enjoy the show on YouTube now. I don't know whether you were aware of this, but you can see the whole show on YouTube with sort of interruptions and I think even advertisement breaks removed. So that is something you could watch later while pondering the question of why you derive such enormous internal pleasure, such emotional joy from just literally watching beautiful things. Try it with the sound off. See what happens. That would be my. In fact, now that I'm talking about it, for anyone who is watching on YouTube, I'm now looking for the first time this week down the barrel of the camera. I hope that wasn't too frightening for you. Wheel hubs. John's question in Islington. Motoring. Already getting quite a lot of criticism for it not being a very good question, but, John is a stalwart of the show. Why do the wheel hubs on the front wheels of big vehicles poke out while on the back wheels they poke in? And so, this was a good question from Portugal. In British Sign Language, how do you sign a word that is unique and peculiar to a foreign language, i.e. a word that doesn't translate, like saudade in Portuguese or philoxenia in Greek? Kevin's in Gillingham. Kevin, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
Why can't I get a hangover?
Are you serious?
Yep.
How hard have you tried?
Yeah, I'm 48 years old. So, yeah, seriously tried.
And so after a proper skinful, you wake up the next morning and you're not feeling anything?
No, nothing at all. I've always been curious why. And my friends hate me.
I bet they do. I do too, and we've only just met. That's incredible. I mean, do you sleep the same?
Yeah, sleep exactly the same, and then I get up for work. I do early morning shifts. I work in a casino, so I have to be there.
Do you always drink? Do you drink a lot of water when you're drinking alcohol? Do you have any little tactics when you're on the lam?
No, I drink a lot of coffee.
While drinking alcohol, or the rest of the time?
I'll do a couple of espressos while I'm out.
Okay.
And that's it.
And this has been true since you were a teenager?
Yeah.
I almost feel that you might be of interest to medical science, Kevin. I'm just imagining whether I'm slightly frightened of what my life might have been like if I didn't suffer from hangovers. Well, that's remarkable. Couple of texts already saying my wife doesn't get hangovers either. It's so infuriating. Have you ever asked a doctor or a I don't know, a landlord?
No, just always enjoyed taking a mick out my friends when we go for breakfast the following morning after.
And they're in pieces.
Yeah.
They're giving
And
it the
then-
whole never again, don't ever let me ever, and you're just sitting there, I bet
it's
you get
100%, never again, never again. And then I'll basically drive home and, go to work.
Keith thinks you might always be drunk. You could be existing in a state of permanent drunkenness, but clearly not. No, 2 more texts coming in. All right, you're on. So why does Kevin and indeed Renata and our anonymous texters' wife and others, why do they never get hangovers? Good grief. I don't. Well, it's fascinating. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Tony's in Norwich. Tony, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on, Tony.
It's a question about the where water goes in your body.
Yes.
It's osmoregulation.
Nearly. What does that mean?
Basically, I think the chap that...
It's not a great phone line. I think it's just gone. Also, Tony sounded a bit distracted, I felt. I don't know whether that's fair or not, but we can add the word osmo. Do we still have the, what's it, for that other word that sounds a bit... Do we still have that? All right, keep on your toes, mate, because I think it might be popping up today. We shall see. Tim's in Hackney. Tim, question or answer?
Hi, James. So, answer to the deriving beauty from nature.
You mean just getting a real joy out of just looking at beautiful things?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. That reminds me. You can watch the show on YouTube now. If you just do a little search, you can find that we've been up now for a couple of weeks, so there's probably about 20 hours, well, more. Anyway, sorry, Tim. I don't know why those two things just keep appearing together in my mind. What would you like to say?
Well, it's quite simple. So I'm a photographer, and it's all about composition. So it occurs in photos and in nature.
Really?
You've got, like, rules of third, golden ratio particularly, but... it's like there was a photo that went viral in New Year's years ago where I think it was in Manchester High Street where so much was going on and everyone was like, this is an amazing photo, and they couldn't work out why. And it just uses golden ratio, and you see that occurring in nature just as much as you do it a photo.
Really?
Yeah. You've got, so for example, shells or symmetry as well. It's all to do with composition and how that you can capture.
I can see it on a photo, but I mean, looking at why a waterfall then, and not a I don't know a microphone.
A microphone uses symmetry.
Yeah, but I never get a kick out of looking at a microphone like I do out of looking at a waterfall.
No, but you could argue that the design of that would be in the same way.
Somebody somewhere might prefer looking at a microphone to a waterfall.
Well,
what's the evolutionary advantage? Sorry, it sounds like I'm badgering you. It's a far too aggressive line of inquiry for a perfectly innocuous contribution to the... Why can't I look at a microphone? Where's the evolutionary advantage from getting a kick out of looking at beautiful things? Or just a nice view?
Well, there's also, I suppose, colour theory comes into it too. I'm not too well versed on that to define that, but in terms of composition, I feel like that's...
I don't think it is. I think you're barking up the wrong waterfall. I don't because taking a beautiful picture is very different from getting because you could take a beautiful picture of a microphone, but nobody is ever going to stop in their tracks as they walk past this studio and go, "Oh, look at that microphone." But they are with a waterfall.
Does that not depend on the type of microphone, though?
No.
Because you've got the old sort of vintage 60s microphones compared to a modern day one.
Mate, come on.
Possibly. But it still uses the basic sort of symmetry in its design.
I don't think. What about like a sky, a picture of a sky? A lovely picture of a sky, or you're standing on a beach looking at
so horizon,
or a tree.
Horizon,
a beautiful
for example,
tree. I like bridges, a crane. I like looking at cranes, but that's possibly closer to microphones.
Crane. If you've got a crane, you've got the actual arm up. Again, that would still use the golden ratio.
But stop saying golden ratio. Where is the evolutionary advantage in getting a kick out of looking at things? That was the real question.
Yeah. But it still occurs in nature for it to still. I don't know.
But why? Why have we evolved to enjoy views? Is the question. Not necessarily why do we like views, but why have we evolved to enjoy views?
Are they not the same answer, though.
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% confident, so I'm going to give you half a round of applause. All right?
Cheers.
What happened then? We just ran away with you, didn't it? Unbelievable. Tim, you got more than you deserve there, but I won't demand that you return it. Luke is in Cardiff. Luke, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
Lovely. So I'll take us off where the last guy left off with osmoregulation.
Osmoregulation. Careful, Keith. Carry on.
There we go. So where your body senses a drop in water, so most of your water is held inside your cells.
Yeah.
As they use up water, they draw water from outside the cells, which is just in tissues.
Yeah.
And then your body senses a drop in blood pressure. So as you sense a drop in blood pressure, your body will stimulate certain hormones, which will drive thirst and so on, and stimulate your kidneys to retain more water. And you want to drink them because you're getting thirsty. And your body doesn't really prioritize water anywhere but in your blood and in your tissues. So as you drink, it's absorbed through your large intestine and then later in your smaller intestine, fills up your blood, it's distributed around your body.
And is are there different forms of dehydration then? If you've had a skimful the night before, or if you've just run a marathon, then you'll have dehydration in different parts of your body, perhaps?
Not necessarily. It's mainly in your cells.
Right.
But it's mostly it's
yeah, but I
used
meant
up
the cells
different ways.
in the cells in different parts of your body, or not? Am I being a bit thick?
No, it might be that it might be used up in, say, your muscles sooner. So if you just run a marathon, it might be taken out of your muscles, but gradually your body will distribute water from other places and evenly distribute it around your body. So it's more a case of where it's burnt is more important. So you might use up water in your muscles sooner, but if you've got like an exam, you might be stressed and then you might be sweating and you lose water elsewhere. But this also feeds into the other question, which was about the gentleman who doesn't get hangovers.
Yeah. Well, you're not allowed to do that, sadly.
Okay.
I wish you were now, because I bet we don't find anyone who can, and I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. Is there anything I can do with Kevin that would allow me to adopt some of his superpower? No, what a ridiculous question. What am I going to do? Lick his face or something and come away with his magic hangover-proof physiognomy?
The only option you've got is to drink a lot more alcohol, and gradually your liver will build up more enzymes to break down alcohol quicker.
So he's got a really good liver then?
So he's got really good stores.
But he was born with that, I think. He didn't sound like a massive drinker. Can you be born with it?
Yeah, you could be born with a bigger liver. Some people are just lucky they're born with a bigger liver, or they've got bigger stores of certain enzymes that break down.
Really? Oh no, you can.
Yeah.
I'm letting you carry on with this. It's too good to miss. So you and will he pass that on? Is that going to be hereditary?
Potentially.
Should have asked him about his parents, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I know. I need like a genetic biome for him to figure this out. But,
so do I.
Yeah, generally you just need a bigger liver.
Into my veins.
You might have enzymes which break down alcohol, and then as a result of that he's able to get rid of it quicker, but he might have a better response to alcohol, because when you're the morning after, when you're all dehydrated, it's because alcohol suppresses antidiuretic hormone, which is released by your kidneys.
Yeah.
And when it's suppressed, your body just loses loads of water. That's why you pee loads when you've been drinking.
Yeah.
And once the alcohol is broken down, gradually your antidiuretic hormone switches back on, and then you'll gradually retain fluid and rehydrate
So
yourself.
you're not weeing out all the alcohol and losing fluid with it, which is not ideal, but it's better than keeping the alcohol in your system. Okay, so that you've done that, and on the first question about there's not going to be a part of the body that is more dehydrated than another part of the body. There's going to be an equal spread of cell-based water depletion.
Pretty much, yeah. So you hold about 70% of your water in your cells.
No, you've done it, mate.
30% is in tissues.
You've nailed it. You've nailed qualifications. Massive
I am
boozer.
an alcoholic and a paramedic practitioner.
Right, I need to give you 2 rounds of applause, so we should have got that bit back from Tim. He had too much. First one for Luke. I don't think we've ever done this before. Certainly not for 2 answers. And another one for Luke, because that was brilliant.
Wicked.
Thank you, mate. Mind how you go. And a quick shout to John, who's been in touch with regards to getting an aesthetic kick out of microphones. He says, sorry, James, show me a 50s Newman U89 and I'm in a puddle. 10 to 1 is the time. Sheila Fogarty back from her confinement shortly. Until then, a couple more questions in need of answers and time for a couple more questions. So we'll do that first. Martin's in Coventry. Martin, question or answer?
It's a question. When it rains, why do wood pigeons sit out on rooftops, get wet? They sit still, and all of the birds disappear.
Are you sure about how much research have you done into this?
Quite a lot of research out of my kitchen window, looking at the flats opposite. They sit on the rooftops, on the aerials.
How do you know they're wood pigeons? Would they be wood pigeons or pigeons?
Yeah. No, not scroty feral pigeons.
They're proper wood pigeons. Like the
proper wood pigeons. Them ones. Yeah,
those pigeons.
Yeah.
And they stay outdoors, and all the other birds take shelter.
They seem to sit still on aerials, chimneys, rooftops. I say, in the gutters over the road from me, and they just sit there in the rain. I think they go when it gets torrential rain, but if it's drizzle, light rain, they just sit there when everything else just disappears. So everything else scoot off and disappear into the trees, and they just sit there.
Well, I never.
That's it.
Well, that's it. You're on the list. I hope we get an answer. Well, wood pigeons. I wonder, do they get hangovers? Do they get hangovers? That's the big mystery of the day. I'm getting bombarded now. My dad and brother never get hangovers. That's got to hurt. That's got to hurt, hasn't it? I mean, not only because you might end up questioning your paternity. 12:52 is the time. Paul's in Gatwick. Paul, question or answer?
I've got an answer for you, James.
Let's go.
HCV one.
Oh, yeah.
Right. The reason they appear different, on the front, you had the steer axle that just has a single wheel. All the other wheels, they're doubled up.
Right.
So to get two wheels on the same axle, one wheel goes on the right way first way, and then the second wheel, the one you look at, is turned 180 degrees, almost face to face, goes on backwards. Hence why the wheel nuts appear deeper inside, and it looks different. So it's
so
to
they're
allow
the same
two
wheels
to go on the same wheel.
The same.
Yeah, they're all the same wheels all around the vehicle.
Oh.
The front ones are the steer ones, and they're bolted on. The hub, as you see, the face of the wheel, slightly offset. It allows all the gubbins underneath, the brake calipers and what have you, to fit inside the wheel. So, imagine taking that wheel off and then reversing it. So
putting it back on again. So if you've got two wheels at the back, the inner wheel is the same, is sighted the same.
Goes on the same way.
As the front
the second wheel, the one you can see, goes on backwards.
So they're bump to bump. They're bump to bump then, as it were.
That's it. You've got it.
Qualifications?
HCV driver.
2 for 2. Round of applause for Paul. Lovely work, mate. That's not a bad question then in the end, was it, Paul? Given that we don't really
and I know you don't like motoring
I don't.
questions, but I was driving and...
I don't mind motoring answers, Paul. So I don't want you to feel judged. It's the motoring questions I don't like. So John, frankly, was chancing his arm a bit there, but I won't lie. I'm glad he did. That was actually quite interesting. Thank you very much, Paul. Drive carefully, please. 12:54 is the time. Sean's in Ulster.
Hi there, James.
Ulster. Hi, Sean. Question or answer? Ulster.
Right,
Warwickshire.
first time.
Carry on.
An answer, please. And can I say, an absolute honour to speak to you.
Let's not get carried away. It's an absolute honour to speak to you too. What have we got?
Thank you. It's an answer, James, about the BSL question, which I thought was a cracker.
Yes.
It doesn't make any difference if the signer is signing a word in a foreign language or in English, because BSL is in itself its own language. It is a foreign language, effectively.
Right.
And BSL doesn't work on the premise of translating word for word.
Yes.
It's all about the meaning.
So there will either be a way of conveying what is conveyed by words like saudade and philoxenia in British Sign Language, or there won't.
Yes, exactly. But as long as the signer knows what that word means, they can get the meaning across. And you used a wonderful example before, Schadenfreude.
Yes.
And I was having a giggle to myself about that, because in BSL, what you do is point away from yourself to an imaginary person and show them with a miserable face.
Yeah.
And then you point to yourself and show yourself, and you say, but point to yourself, and you give yourself a smiley face.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I just did?
Go on.
I just did it. I forgot I was on the radio. Well, obviously you can enjoy this programme on YouTube now, which reminds me, we haven't asked the question yet properly about why we derive such pleasure out of looking at beautiful things. I don't know why those two things keep popping up together in my mind. But I did literally just do the sign for Schadenfreude. Well, not really. It's pathetic. I've been on the radio for 20 years and I just forgot that no one can see me most of the time. What are your qualifications, Sean?
I've got a degree in French, and I happen to be married to a wonderful woman called Sally, who's been a qualified sign language interpreter for many, many years.
That's perfect qualifications then. Absolutely beautiful. Round of applause.
Pleasure. Thank you, James.
Oh, thank
Cheers.
you. So I genuinely did that. Do you know Sheila's in the studio now? Welcome back.
Hello.
Nice to see you looking so
My
well.
confinement. It was
Your confinement is
like
complete.
I should bring a baby
like
in
a
with
Jane
me.
Austen heroine. Do you know how to say Schadenfreude in British Sign Language?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Shall I show you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm enjoying your misfortune here. So you're but it could be just a random person. You go like this.
That's good.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, no one can see us.
No, I know.
Yeah.
James is in Bayswater. James, question or answer?
I've got an answer for you, James.
I know that. I know that voice. I know those mellifluous tones I would recognise anywhere. It is the...
I'd like to think it's not that distinctive.
It is pretty distinctive, James, as you well know. James Wong, botanist and all-round good bloke. What have you got? I
can't sneak up on you. Well, the answer is about why we find certain views of the natural world instinctively attractive.
Yes.
And the answer is we don't find all views of the natural world instinctively attractive. We don't like, a ditch filled with cow mess and flies and, potential malaria.
Exactly.
We find very specific views exciting. And that's because we're genetically programmed to find the environments that are most suitable for our species. And it's the environment you see in pretty much any picturesque painting. The theory is called prospect and refuge.
Wow.
So there's always prospect, so there's always an open space, usually an open plain where we could find prey.
Yeah.
Or if it isn't animal food we'd be looking after, it'd be plant food. So universally we find flowers attractive. And the reason why we get excited about flowers is because they're the location of future fruit. So if you find flowers incredibly beautiful, you're likely, when you're wandering around on a plain, to remember where that was and go back to that location. So that's prospect. And then there's also refuge. So there's always a little protected bit. You're hiding away from predators. There's always, in the part of the prospect, there's always fresh water because our species needs that. You mentioned waterfalls. Fresh running water is always preferable to stagnant water.
Oh, of course.
Gosh. It's the basis of every painting you've ever seen of a natural landscape, every garden design. It's hardwired into our DNA.
Oh, man, that's one of my favourite answers of all time. That is a thing of beauty. Reminders of your qualifications, please, James.
So I am an ethnobotanist, and what we do is we are anthropologists that study how people use plants.
I mean, we've had a pretty special mystery out today, so we may as well go all in. I think, James, you get one of these.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you
I'm framing it, and I'm sending it to my mum.
Thank you, James. Oh, dear. And if you enjoy James's work and his intelligence, really, and his knowledge as much as I do, then you must download and listen to the Full Disclosure episode that we did with him, I think last year, certainly a while ago, but it's all there in the archive. And that is it for another day. James got a Ray Liotta, so we'll cross him off the list of contenders for the Mystery Hour board game. I think it's got to go to Luke, hasn't it? Who went double. I was tempted to give it to Alice. I don't know whether I've given Alice one before, but anyway, it goes to Luke for the double answer on hangovers and hydration. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back. We didn't. Yes, we did as well, and that's well. He didn't really explain why looking at people would be beautiful. But anyway, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can find all of LBC's shows to catch up on. That's just basic reproduction, isn't it? As well as the world's biggest podcasts. Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com 4 o'clock, Tom Sawbrick. Sheila Fogarty back with you now. 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 Fogarty back with you now.